Planning Commission meeting to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item, approval of minutes. We have 2 regular sessions and 1 work session that we received minutes on. I believe there's been some comments and revisions. Does anyone have any further comments on these?
I move that they, all 3 be adopted as edited.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Just do a call. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next item is declaration of conflict of interest. This is a portion during our hearing where any member of the Planning Commission or staff that has a conflict on any item being heard would state that and the reason for which they have a conflict. Do we have any conflicts of interest this evening, members? I'll speak up. I do have a conflict of interest on items number 6 and number 7. CVAS Properties LLC is an entity that is controlled by my employer, and I've also had conversations with staff on these items in my role as Director of Engineering for the Silver Company. So I will be turning the gavel over to Mr. Gant when those 2 items come up. Item number 5, Fredericksburg Pathway Plan. Would we recognize Mr. Nelson, or it's your show?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As you know, we presented this to you last month, this Pathways document. We have been working on it since, have been adding some additional sections, receiving additional input from different parts of the community. The version that you received in your packet can be supplemented by some additional pages that were handed out this evening that relate to the appendices. Some additional information. The new appendix is Appendix E, which is access to recreational areas, and that was recommended to us by the Parks and Recreation and Events Department as formalizing some specific projects so that we can pursue funding opportunities. We also have provided a revised map this evening. The one that we gave you last time was admittedly difficult to read, and we think this is an improvement. I can't take credit for it. Our GIS person did this, so I have to thank him. But it is available to you this evening, and we can make additional changes to any of these things as you desire. But would like to receive recommendation this evening from the commission so that we can take this on to the City Council in July. Be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I did review this. It's quite a bit more extensive than the last meeting, so it's a very comprehensive document. Thank you and staff for putting it together. Earlier, I thought I heard a conversation about maybe some comments. Does any of the Planning Commission members have any comments or questions regarding the Trailways plan they'd like to ask Mr. Nelson?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't here for the last meeting, and so I have not seen or heard any of the presentation, but I do have a number of questions about it. If I can start at the beginning of it. Oh, gee, where is it here? Wait a minute, just a second. If you'll bear with me a minute. I thought we were going to have a whole presentation tonight. On the map that was distributed this evening, I was wondering if you could explain some of the things on there, Mr. Nelson. Like, for example, on the VCR trail west of Route 1, I see there the proposed bridge across Hazel Run. Okay, you see that?
Yes.
Okay, what about the area west of that? There are those 4 or 5 little green spots. What does all that mean?
That is that rail bed will remain in its natural state. Was put down in the 1850s. It drains well, it's solid, and doesn't need improvement at this point, and so the intent is to leave it as is. It's a usable track, usable trail. It looks like we need to, as we've done on the legend, we have dotted lines for proposed, solid lines for existing, and it looks like we need to add a dotted green line so that we can show that that in fact is actually it's existing, so it probably should be a solid green.
Well, I'm just kind of curious that the rest of that whole trail is paved.
Right.
Why stop there?
Until there's a connection beyond in Spotsylvania County, this is, there's no real compelling need to press on. When the trail ultimately is pushed on into Spotsylvania County and it can be paved for its full length, we think that's an appropriate time. At this point, it's a natural surface trail. It functions well. It's nice. It's dry. It drains well. So there's no compelling reason to put pavement down at this point. So we just are not proposing to do that. And it remains in character of that area. It's a natural area, good place for bird watching and other kinds of things. So a natural surface trail seemed appropriate.
Is that used much now? I mean, it's kind of a cul-de-sac.
Right. It's kind of like the canal trail that used to be used. People would walk the canal trail to one end and then back. It's used a lot by the Kingswood neighborhood. Once that bridge is in place, it'll be a usable trail beyond there. And even usable for bicycles again, because it's a nice solid surface.
You're talking about
Pardon?
the Kingswood now, but that's in the county, correct?
Right.
Okay. And at the top, all the green pathways that are labeled off-road recreational existing
Right.
over there along the river.
Right.
What do those consist of? I haven't ever been.
Those are natural surface trails. Those are built by, it used to be an organization called Fat Mug. It's now Fred Trails. They are mountain bike folks, and they routinely build trails. They build them to International Mountain Bike Association standards, which means that they're solid, use the terrain appropriately so that they don't erode, they don't, if they become worn out, they can be repaired, but they're built in such a fashion that they work with the terrain and they remain intact through the weather.
And those are within conservation easement, I believe, aren't they?
Right.
And so they would not,
Conservation, some of them
couldn't be
on-
paved. They could not be paved under the
Right,
terms
that's
of
a good
that.
point, yeah.
But the same thing happened in Idlewild, where we have a portion of the trail where Fat Mud, Fredericksburg Trails came in. And the trail that was supposed to be there, they redesigned it so that it works a little bit better for us.
I see. And so those trails out there along the river are currently used by people with mountain bikes?
Mountain bikes and hikers, a whole variety of people, no horses. But yes, and they're really well-built trails and function very well.
And the city maintains those?
No, city does not, Fat Mug does, or Fred Trails.
Huh. I see. So they police that and everything?
They do, actually. There's a very large group of users in the area, so they have a lot of volunteers, a lot of strong young men.
I think you also have the river stewards out there from
Right.
time to time as well, because
Right.
it's part of the city's riparian lands.
I see. And these trails that are marked with the green, are there any plans to make additional improvements to any of those?
Not so much make improvements to the trails, they're pretty substantial as they are. There are always plans to add trails to provide new experiences and such. Again, they do this carefully. A lot of activity is occurring out in, around the Mott's Run Reservoir at this point. A lot of the trails in this area have been pretty much completed. The network is considered complete. There might be a couple of desire to make a couple more difficult trails, but most of the trail building activity is around the Mott's Run Reservoir.
And all of these ones shown on here are on city property?
Well, combination. There's city property, some is on Celebrate Virginia property. It's a mix. But most of them shown here are on city property or on the easement property.
Oh, okay. The steering committee that was participated in developing this plan, is that committee to remain active?
No, actually, that committee will go defunct. We have an in-house transportation group that meets, and we'll use that as the formal committee. So the steering committee has been meeting for a while, but at the completion of this project, then that committee will end.
I noted that there wasn't anybody from the planning commission on the steering committee. Was there some reason for that?
No, it's just the way it worked out. Be happy to include anybody that wants to be, but we were bringing this to the full commission anyways.
Yeah, okay. You also mentioned that it had been sort of presented or vetted by neighborhood associations.
We took it, right.
The only one listed here was the Rising Sun.
Rising Sun. We had a couple more neighborhoods represented when we went to the community center. But Rising Sun was the only neighborhood that wanted a specific presentation. I've talked with other neighborhoods, and they were either fine with the way it is, or they just didn't get around to
And we had,
setting up a meeting.
one of our board members was actually on the steering committee for Idlewild.
Because I don't remember any discussion about it in our Fall Hill Neighborhood Association.
Right.
Okay. Okay. One of the things I noticed in the report was that talking about our I don't know what you call them, but what I call them bus stops, and talking about improvements. I noticed that one of the things that you were talking, let's see, I don't know where it is here, about transit stops.
Right.
And you're talking about improvements for those.
Right.
Some benches and shelter and that sort of thing. Are there any plans, do you know of, in our CIP for improving any of those?
There's kind of an ongoing ongoing policy to do these things as feasible. Fred is currently putting together an application to make improvements at 25 bus stops, shelters, and such. So there's always ongoing plans. They have a lot of other things they need to do as well. So bus stops don't always make it into the CIP, but they do pursue other funding to address those.
Because I think it would be good if this report somehow highlighted that and the need for more improvements at those stops. And I don't know how we would do that, and we never talked about it when we were discussing the CIP, but I personally see so many people standing out in the weather hoping for a bus to come by,
Right.
with no place to sit or shade or anything, and it would be very, very helpful to the people who are using the Fred to have a little comfort.
Right.
And I can't imagine that much of it would be expensive at all.
It really isn't. It's I mean, cumulatively it becomes expensive, but as they work with different private entities where there's, malls or commercial areas, and get them to fund certain improvements, so they do a lot of that. But you're right, we have a lot of stops that don't have that kind of,
Right.
don't have those kinds of sponsors, and I'd be happy to jazz up the emphasis a little bit so that can become more of a CIP item. I think that's entirely appropriate.
Now, you had here the local projects on page 37. And it includes your bridges, trails,
Right.
various things. Perhaps it could be added there some way, and even if there's no funding identified,
Sure.
that it could be noted that it's needed and that at least some efforts are underway to try to improve that.
We can certainly do that.
Great, I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask about bicycle lanes. How is the city currently handling and dictating those and using them, and what's been the success of them?
The city is, the only thing the city's,
I'm used to seeing them a lot in Washington, and
Right.
they're really dangerous
they
for
can
both
be-
the
they can be
bicyclists and the cars and pedestrians and.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a neat idea. I just was
Right.
wondering what your experience has been.
Our experience so far has been, the city is limited in that a bicycle lane is going to take up a certain amount of the existing
Yeah.
right-of-way. A lot of the right-of-way has been established. We made the suggestion once that we could maybe remove a lane of parking, put in a bike boulevard, two-way bike route on a one-way street, and the neighborhood went nuts. And so we thought, okay, that's not a good idea. So what we're finding, we talk a lot about shared roadways, and so the shared roadways can be either a bicycle lane or a, more likely, something like a share road, and enough signage to make clear that, you know, there is that there's two modes of transportation and sharing the road. We're finding, again, that the limitations of the existing right-of-way is gonna dictate that we use a lot of sharrows. There are gonna be places where we can put a bike lane. Idlewild has some really wide routes, and that may be a good place to do that. But most of the other neighborhoods around the city, the roads are just not wide enough to really dedicate part of the pavement for bicycle
So what's the
use.
idea behind the painting the bicycle on the pavement?
That's to let a motorist know and a cyclist that route is in fact shared.
I see.
So it's the
Do you think that
bicycle
does
is
any
there.
good?
I think it does. It's a lot of it is getting used to it. It's kind of like the yield sign for the pedestrian crosswalks. People have to get used to stopping. Some do, some don't. But it's and then certainly adequate signage as well, just to indicate that it is a shared route. One of the things we've looked at is we put the existing sharrows are on like major roads like William Street and Prince Edward, and shared roadways often work better when there's not so much traffic on the road, and so maybe a less used road is a more appropriate shared use path, and so we have routes that use lesser driven routes, so that in fact the sharing is not as
Are they
Scary.
designed as any sort of pathway or route or anything? Or is
Right.
it just whatever street you think is suitable?
Well, the idea is to create a link, a connection that's logical, such as, say, from here to, the bus stop or, Pratt Central, and use a specific route to do that you would mark on the pavement, that you would put up signage, that you would maybe create pedestrian crossing, safety crossing, like bulb outs and such, where it has to cross a busier street. A variety of things that, in fact, cumulatively, make it a safe route.
Because I was just thinking, I mean, like, let's say that somebody lives in Idlewild
Right.
and wants to ride their bike downtown.
Right.
I mean, and there may be some streets that are real suitable, some that are not very suitable,
Right.
but if at least there were a designated pathway from from point A to B,
Right.
people, I think, might feel a little more encouraged to
And that's
risk
the
it.
intent. Yeah, that's the intent. I mean, for example, certain parts of Idlewild can reach the VCR trail at its trailhead. But Idlewild is a large community, and others would more likely come down to Route 1, where we would need to get a link down to, again, the VCR, where there's a crossing light and such. So yes, the idea is to have designated routes so that people know to expect cyclists on that route, and then also cyclists know that.
Well, that's something that you all might think about of trying to develop more definite routes
Right.
for somebody trying to go from A to B. And like if there were, you know, I mean, you have your designated trails that people know about and use, and they know where they go.
Right,
With a bicycle, it's much, much tougher.
right.
I know I like to bike, and it's a real hit or miss proposition that some streets are very suitable and work fine, and then others are almost prohibitive
Right.
to use. But if, I don't know, it's just something to think about, that maybe there is some feasible way to have several major routes in the city for bicycles.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the other component of that is a logical wayfinding system,
Right.
so that wherever you are, you can find where the nearest route is, you can know when you're on the route,
Right.
and those kinds of things. So-
Anyway, it's just something to think about.
Can I add on to that real
yeah.
quick? Yeah, I think in the last meeting, I'd asked about some of those multi-use, the roadways where it's shared.
Right.
You know, Prince Edward is one.
Right.
If you look at this map, you've got the red lines that are kind of over towards Route 1. You've got some others that are down by Cobblestone. And in between, it makes it look like there's no connectivity, but there actually is. There's the roadways that are shared. I think this plan would benefit from showing those, whether those are ultimately where you want them or not. I think it would be a good idea to show it because it does illustrate the connectivity that's there. And
At least the
to your-
idea
To
is
your
there.
point, you know, I think that you do have that connectivity today. It might not be the ultimate connectivity, it may
Right.
not be ideal, but it is there, and I think it's important to kind of show that in this exhibit if you think it's appropriate.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think that is part of the overall wayfinding system, network, whatever we want to call it. I think you're absolutely right.
You know, like if you're, again, if you're going from downtown to the hospital, let's say, and you have a portion there of Prince Edward that is marked and is familiar to people as suitable for bikes, well, maybe there are 4 blocks there where you should get off of Fall Hill and go over a block or something to get where
Right.
you're going. And if you had it marked or a pathway, then somebody would say, oh, yeah, I ought to turn here. It's safer than
Right.
going on what would appear to be the most direct.
Right,
Route.
I think you're absolutely right.
So anyway, that's
No.
just something to think about. The trails that we have now and that are being built, are any of them pervious surface?
No, they're impervious.
I mean, you know, the pervious asphalt is what
Right,
I'm talking
right,
about.
yeah.
Is any thought given to using different materials?
I think that's certainly an appropriate thing to do. We haven't at this point, but I think that would certainly is a very logical thing to do.
It's a green thing to do.
Well, that too.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay. Now, I can't remember what part of this or any mention of this. I didn't have a chance to go back and look at my comp plan. What's in the comp plan today that's on here?
The comp plan has the larger, I don't have comp plan with me, but it has the,
I have it, but I just haven't had a chance to
it
look at it.
has all of the multi-use paths, but it doesn't have the interconnecting links for the most part. So it has the major routes.
Does it have any of the proposed?
I'll take a quick look.
Well, my point was that I was wondering whether part or all of your pathways plan should be included in the comp plan. I mean-
Absolutely.
I think that's the goal.
I would hope that when you recommend approval, that you recommend that it be approved and incorporated by reference.
You think the whole thing? I mean, you think,
Sure.
uh-huh.
I think absolutely. I mean, this is used as a planning document, but it also helps us pick up funding. So that's a big deal.
Well, and as we consider projects in the future, it seems to me that it's very relevant and would be a good reference point when we are looking at land use applications.
Oh, I think absolutely, yes. I did check the comp plan. What's shown in there are the major multi-use paths, but not the connectors that we're referencing now. So everything that's in the comp plan is in this plan, a lot more.
Well, I also wanted to ask, I don't recall ever looking at the previous iterations of this. Apparently there were 2 in the past.
Right.
Is a lot of this carried over or
Oh, sure. And again, the larger, the network, the multi-use paths, the 10-foot wide routes are kind of the framework for this, and those were carried over in all the previous plans. It's the connecting links, the shared roadways that we're really pushing at this point, just to, again, put that network together. At the time of the other plans, very little of this existed, and now that we actually have close to 10 miles of multi-use path, it's, making it more comprehensive is important.
Well, I think it's impossible to understate or overstate, impossible to overstate, the success of our trail system today.
Right.
And I'm sure that you and Mr. Hairston back there are responsible for a good chunk of it, but I never go along the river path that I'm not astounded by the amount of use and the number of people, the variety of people. They have their dogs, cats, children, you name it. It doesn't matter whether it's winter or summer, rain or shine. It's used tremendously, far more than I would have ever anticipated. And I think that you are to be commended for putting this together. I think it's one of the better planning documents I've seen this city produce in the last 10 years. And I congratulate you on it. I think it's excellent. That's all my comments.
Mr. Rodriguez, you have some comments?
I do. Some questions. Well, first of all, I want to echo that same sentiment. There's a lot of work that went into this, and so thank you to you and the steering committee for that. While we're on the issue of the roads and sharing, I had just a couple quick questions regarding that. On your mention of the Gateway Trail, you talk about an overpass, and I'm just wondering, did you guys have an opportunity to factor in kind of the proposed VA and that intersection that's going to be changed? Was that any consideration to whether or not an overpass would be feasible?
No.
Okay.
It's conceptual at this point. I mean, Route 3 is a busy road.
Right.
Realistically, we're going to end up with an at-grade crossing, but I think separating bicycles from highway traffic, I think, is important. And so we have it in there as a placeholder, if you will. It's a conceptual idea. We think it has merit. We think it's worth looking at carefully. But realistically, as Gateway Boulevard is extended, we will have an at-grade crossing.
Okay.
But we also have the same ideas at Blue and Gray Boulevard, Blue and Gray Parkway, over Route 1, those kind of things.
Sure. I mean, for me, like, I have trouble getting from Wendy's across the street. I mean, it's an issue just for drivers, so,
Sure.
let alone pedestrians. We talked about bicycles. Where does, I don't know, skateboarding fall into this category? I see a lot of people, I live on Prince Edward, I see a lot of people come down the street, and I'm wondering, one, are they safe because they're going in the opposite direction of traffic? And
Right.
and it's becoming a trend, and I'm just wondering, how do we factor those if skateboarding is considered recreational, I know, and things like that, which...
Sure. Well, skateboarding being a wheeled conveyance, I think is certainly appropriate on a trail. Motorized skateboards are not.
Okay.
But, so I think if we have a good cycling network, that would certainly be usable by skateboarders. There is a faction of skateboarding that is somewhat outlaw, and maybe they go the wrong direction on purpose, but I think the facility is there to be used, and I would certainly hope that they would feel inclined to use it as well.
I think the way to get them to use it is to prohibit them from using it. I think you'd get more use if you put signs up that they're prohibited.
Well, I've seen some people that aren't, kids riding around on skateboards too lately.
Right. I've seen people in ties.
Well, and so, okay, so if I understand you then, so anything that's considered like a bike share path could also be considered a skateboard share?
I would think so. I mean,
Okay,
I didn't really think about it in putting this together, but there's a logic to it.
all right. I just, it just came into my mind because last night when I was looking at this on my way home, I saw two people, well, I saw them a little too close before, and I was wondering about that, but, all right, another question that I had, you did mention, I think I was on page 8, they said that they did not do a transit or a bike score calculation. Why was that?
They just haven't gotten around to it yet. They're doing that with the larger cities, but it'll be a while before they catch up with Fredericksburg. I
Okay.
think we're kind of lucky to have the walkability score, but it's just a matter of time, I think, before
Okay.
they get around to it.
And we talked about pedestrian crossings at bus stops. I know I've seen several bus stops have already been moved over the last couple of years. Do we have any sense of how many don't really have safe pedestrian crossings near the bus stops?
I don't have a good feel for that. We do work closely with Fred, and Fred is certainly supportive of all of this, and
Okay.
you know, they want to be an integrated part of the system, so I don't see any real issues in making all these things happen. It's just defining the policies at this point.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm just, because my thought is if we adopt this as a city, then that gets pushed to all
Right.
departments, and that would be something we looked at. I mean,
Right,
I can remember, like, there was a bus stop in front of the Princess Anne building, and now it's on the next corner, I believe, right there, and it's close to the intersection.
right.
So that's a good thing, especially when we have a lot of people that are trying to use the system. And is there any reason why you guys did not try to rank these in terms of like need? I mean, I understand different projects would be different funding methods or
Right,
avenues for
right.
fundraising and grants, but to actually come out and say that, hey, this is what the city of Fredericksburg really needs
Right.
in order of priority or precedence, so that maybe we could adjust the comp plan, or not the comp plan, the capital improvement program,
Right,
things
right.
like that, for us to know, and for council to know. what-
Right, we didn't get into that. I mean, it seems a logical thing to do, but it's also can become contentious. So we thought it more important to make sure we at least identified everything, and then allowed that ranking to occur maybe more organically.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's 144 ideas in here, if you will.
Right, right.
Okay, another question I had, it might have been before my time, but did we actually officially designate a maker district in the Princess Anne corridor? Because in here, it references it as the maker district, and I don't think we approved that yet. Right, but if we adopt this, then we're saying that that's truly what it's called.
That's a good point. We could change it to the Princess Anne Street corridor or something. I mean,
I think that'd be more appropriate, because I
Sure.
don't think the city has completely bought off on maker district, right? Is that a fair statement? Right.
right, and there is a maker district in the Jackson Street area. They call themselves a maker district, so
Right. Do we have one of those for Jackson Street? I don't remember.
there is it's Kenmore Avenue is the
Oh, okay.
is the route.
All
But
right.
yeah, we can remove that designation, just make it more generic.
All right, and I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I have one quick comment. I think the map is great. I think one thing that would be beneficial, you identify city-owned land. I was wondering if maybe you could highlight civic uses like parks, the library, things that people might ride a bike to. You know, you look at the new riverfront park that's proposed. I didn't see a connection for bike trails. I think we ought to be looking at that for the future. Her Camp, some of those others. I think it'd be good that we're looking at these not just as connection through the city to other parts, but to specific destinations where we might have events.
Sure, I think that's an excellent idea. We can certainly do that.
Okay. Now, you're looking for a recommendation to hold a public hearing? Is that what you're asking for tonight?
No, the public hearing is tonight.
Oh, the public hearing is tonight. Okay. All right. Well then, any other comments here? No others? I guess we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on this item, you have 5 minutes to address this issue, and welcome to come up. I don't think we have anybody on the list, so. Okay, seeing no one move, we will declare the public hearing closed, bring it back to commission. Are you all comfortable making a recommendation tonight after this review?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we recommend adoption of the Pathways Plan and suggest that to council that I don't know whether it would be on their initiative or ours, that it be incorporated into the comprehensive plan. Of course, we'd have to go through other public hearings and all that to accomplish that, but we would suggest that it be included as an appendix to the comprehensive plan.
Okay, so we've got a motion. We have a second. That's correct.
I'll second it.
I heard a number of comments on the specific plan. I would think we would want to incorporate those into
Into
that
the
motion and
yeah.
second that were made tonight. I don't know if they all need to be restated, but sounds like we have agreement from you that there'd be good additions to the maps. And
I don't know that I have a list of exactly
You able to go over
the
this?
suggestions. Sure.
What I have is define and clarify the routes, show the shared routes, reference pervious surfaces, change the name of the maker district to be more generic on the plan, on the map, identify the civic uses, civic places such as parks and other kinds of destinations, reference Fred stop improvements for the CIP and add that to the chart on page, that starts on page 37. And that's it.
Can I ask a question? How hard would it be to incorporate the part about the skateboarding use? Is that,
Sure, what would you like me to say?
well, I mean,
Just reference skateboard?
Just reference as,
Sure, sure.
for lawful skateboarding use.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
It's probably a good idea.
I know there's a thing out in the community and they're doing fundraising for a skate park and other things.
Right,
I just want to support our community.
sure, I think we can add that.
expect you to roll in next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so both the,
Then I would amend my motion to include those additional changes.
good on the second? Okay, any other discussion? We good over here? Renee? Okay, all those in favor of recommending adoption of the pathway plans with the corrections noted, please signify by voting. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. All right, the next item is item number 6, CVAS Properties LLC. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gant.
Need that paper you have. The agenda you have. Got a little bit more too. Okay, so item number 6 is the CVAS Properties LLC, and it is indeed a public hearing. And basically, there's a request for a special use permit in order to construct an automotive service use on a portion of GPN 7769-78-7674, the vacant parcel at the northwest corner of the intersection of Fall Hill Avenue and Hospitality Lane. It is in the Planned Development Commercial Zoning District, PDC. The automotive service uses are permitted in the PDC zoning district by special use permit. It is a 2,100 square foot building on a proposed 1.01 acre parcel for the use, which would equate to a 0.05 floor area ratio. The comp plan does designate the area for planned development commercial, which has no specific recommended non-residential floor area ratio. Okay. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. If I can have the computer, thank you. The question for the Planning Commission this evening is whether or not to approve a special use permit for that automotive service use, as described by Mr. Gant, at the intersection of Hospitality Lane and Fall Hill Avenue. The presentation is in 5 parts. I'll go through the existing conditions, discuss the proposed use, go through potential impacts and proposed mitigation, discuss compliance with the comprehensive plan, and give the staff recommendation, which is to defer action on this project and hold the public hearing open until the July 11th meeting. The automotive service use is proposed on a portion of a vacant 2.72 acre parcel at the intersection of Fall Hill Avenue and Hospitality Lane, and that's what's shown up on your screen now. This is the property outlined in the dashed cyan line. The property is zoned planned development commercial and is within Celebrate Virginia South. As such, the property is subject to the Celebrate Virginia South agreement, I'll call it the side agreement throughout the presentation, which did put additional rules onto the development in 2005. That was after the rezoning. So this is not proffered conditions, it is a separate side agreement. The applicant proposes to split the property into 3 parcels. The automotive service use is proposed on the easternmost parcel. If you look at the top of the screen, it is the parcel shaded gray right here. It is roughly an acre in size. The applicant proposes a 2,100 square foot automotive service use. And you can see the bays here. They've got 3 service bays here. They also plan to provide a type D buffer. That's what this dotted hatch is around the perimeter of the property in order to screen that use. The largest question about this project relates to the request for a direct access point from the property onto Fall Hill Avenue. The diagram on this screen includes a green and cyan hatch delineating the landscape buffer required as part of the side agreement that was agreed to in 2005. Originally, the buffer was required to be 50 foot wide, contain a berm, and as such would prevent direct access from Fall Hill Avenue to adjacent property. The area is colored green in front of the banks on either side of the Gordon-Shelton Fall Hill Avenue intersection, and the Wegmans retain those features. The cyan hatch here indicates a narrower buffer between 24 and 42 foot wide. The modification to the buffer was permitted by a city council approved amendment to the agreement in 2007 to accommodate the development of the Hampton Inn and Suites that's on that property. The Celebrate Virginia South frontage on Fall Hill Avenue contains an existing access point indicated by these orange arrows right here on the bottom left of the screen. The existing access is a right in, right out, which serves multiple parcels, including the Bill Buttram building and the Sheets. However, that access point was constructed prior to the side agreement. That was already there once the 2005 agreement was in place. This diagram also shows a pink arrow here, extending all the way to the right of the screen. That denotes the location of a 10-foot wide shared access path added to the north side of the Fall Hill Avenue by the city when the street was widened last year. The yellow arrows here indicate the general location of the proposed access. The access will be located 292 feet from the Hospitality and Fall Hill Avenue intersection and would include a 100-foot turn lane and taper. Movement would be restricted to rights in and rights out. There's a median blocking the street there, so there's no cross movement. It's not a full access intersection, which would be required to be further away. And the question tonight is twofold. First, should this access be permitted? We're looking for a recommendation on that. To permit the access point, the City Council would have to agree, again, to modify the Celebrate Virginia South agreement. This time, the agreement would have to permit an access point to cross a buffer. Looking strictly at the location criteria, so the distance from the intersection and the improvements leading up to the access point, the proposed access meets standard spacing, taper, and turn lane requirements. However, and I think I'm going to go back to this screen here, the access would cross the Fall Hill Avenue Trail, and that begs the second question. If an access is permitted in this location, can it properly mitigate impacts to the city bike trail? The current entrance design, and now we're looking more at the actual entrance here itself. The width of that access point, the throat, meaning the distance from the right-of-way line into the site distance for cars at either point coming in or coming out, and the radii of this entrance here either do not meet VDOT standards, the standards of the side agreement, or more information is required to determine that they do. The trail crossing as proposed, which you see the trail here, requires a pedestrian to navigate 40 foot of unmarked asphalt facing a variety of vehicles, including heavy trucks. As such, it does not properly minimize conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. And I've listed here on this screen, let's go back one, right here at the bottom, some of the criteria used to evaluate the safety of pedestrian conflicts for discussion, if we get that far. So if access is it's okay to permit an access here, I think we should talk about these things here. Reducing that width, changing the materials,
No.
proper signage, landscaping, site distance, those things. But getting back to the larger proposal, this screen evaluates the project's compliance with the comprehensive plan of the UDO. The two uses we're talking about tonight, this is basically going to be a very similar presentation to the next item. Convenience store with gasoline sales and automotive repair services are both appropriate uses to locate along the frontage of a major commercial development at the intersection of Celebrate, Virginia, I-95, and Fall Hill Avenue. However, outside of this access issue, the project as proposed, both of them, needs work in order to comply with Unified Development Ordinance and site agreement standards. The issues that the layouts have, we listed in the staff report. We had sent these to the applicant after the TRC concluded its review a few weeks ago, and they haven't been able to modify their proposal yet, though I do believe they are working on that. The issues include proper sidewalk connections, especially along Hospitality Lane, provisions for the landowner's share of the signalization of Fall Hill Avenue and Hospitality Lane, and too much proposed parking on this site. This is an interesting value that's in the Unified Development Ordinance. The UDO actually minimizes excess pavement. You're not allowed to provide more spaces at over a certain percentage than you typically can, which is a good value to have. Our recommendation, the Planning Commission should defer making a recommendation on this application and continue the public hearing through the July 11th meeting to provide time for the applicant to modify their proposal to meet those UDO standards. It would be prudent to have a discussion about access today. If you all feel that an access break could be permitted, then we should focus on the access point and look at those design criteria, give guidance on how that's achievable. If not, then we don't need to have that discussion, but that should be made clear as well. Again, this will all just be a recommendation to the City Council, who will ultimately have to decide on that policy. Again, a lot of this discussion is going to be relevant to both special use cases this evening, but that's the entirety of the presentation for this automotive service uses. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have.
Fellow commissioners? Questions?
Go ahead.
Comments?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I have a few questions, just as I went through all the packet, and just so I can understand some context. Is this the same piece of property that was originally proffered as the fire station, or is that a different parcel?
That's a different property.
Okay. In the site agreement, the condition number 4, there was an amount of hotel space that had to be done. Has that been met?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Currently now, my question, how does the installation of the traffic light, how will that affect pedestrian activity? Because you're going to put a light in right there, if I understand.
Yes, sir.
Because you'll encounter the same issue with pedestrians running the trail, right?
That's right. That will also have a pedestrian signal. And if we go back to the map, and this is a good point to get into the discussion on, if I could have a computer back. Let me go back here. This entrance here is going to be 4 lanes.
Yeah.
It's going to have a high visibility crosswalk here, and that is just the white thermoplastic crosswalk that you generally see.
Sure. What's the width of that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but the crosswalk itself is between 10 and 12 feet, but Jervis says 12 feet. That's probably a standard marking that
Okay.
VDOT has. But it would also have a pedestrian signal at that light. This crossing here would not be signalized, so there's a difference there. And pay attention to the width. That's 40 feet, which is the equivalent of more than 3 lanes. There is currently no markings shown there, nor signage. And we also have a concern about that radii right there being too sharp. So those are kind of the criteria. If an access was okay to include there, that we'd be looking at.
Okay. Will we get an opportunity to ask the applicant if they've got a solution for that tonight, or?
Yes, sir.
Does
The
that come
the
later?
applicant is here. Yeah, if he usually gives a presentation, and.
Okay, well, I'll finish asking my questions, and then we can circle back with that when he makes that presentation. I saw something in there, in the side agreement that mentioned about that the sidewalks had to be brick. Would that also impact the trail then, or do they have to build an
Yeah.
additional sidewalk?
The criteria is that they be a stamped asphalt, but it would be the colored stamped asphalt that would appear to be brick. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's not shown there on that GDP, but absolutely, a change in the materials would help the visibility. For someone driving, they say, okay, there's something there.
Right.
Currently, there's nothing shown there. So, at a minimum, they need to do the stamped asphalt that you're referring to. That's what they agreed to do.
Okay. And then, I guess I don't understand the parking thing, the 72-53 1C number 2. More parking is bad?
Yes. Again, the value in the ordinance is less asphalt, less excess asphalt. We have a set of minimum off-street parking standards. So you have to provide for this use, let me get to my chart here. You have to provide a minimum of,
Yeah, it's like 125 or something like that.
a minimum of 7 parking spaces. You can exceed that amount, 125%, I think you said, you can just build, 9 spaces or whatever. But between 125 and 175, where the 7-Eleven has hit that, it requires an alternative parking agreement. You have to have, legitimate engineering or use, specific reasons. With the 7-Eleven, being a convenience store, high traffic area, maybe that's okay. Anything above 175% requires a special exception to go through a whole process. So they would have had to submit a special exception application. We would have had to advertise it for a public hearing. It would ultimately, you guys would make a recommendation on it. The city council would have to approve it. It's a good safeguard against excess asphalt. So we're hoping that instead of doing that and us re-advertising for that they'll pull the parking number down, but that certainly can be part
Okay.
of the discussion too.
And is there any industry standard for when you have 2 different businesses or operations going on that are sharing a parking lot, if you will? Is there any kind of standard? And I know we have to evaluate this individually, but
Sure.
if you look at the 7-Eleven and you look at the traffic that will come out of the Valvoline, they're almost going to run into the gas tanks. I mean, it's not to scale, but
Oh,
there's the
okay.
traffic movement.
Let's go back to the map.
Yeah.
And
And so
make
I'm
sure
just
I
wondering
understand
if there is something that,
that one may not be clear. I'll tell you what, I'm going to open up the other presentations. I think that's got the GDP on it. And let's talk about that issue too. Okay, here you go. So your concern here is that their access easement
because they'll drive through the,
drives over the tanks,
yeah, when they come out of the Valvoline gas station,
right?
unless they make a determination to go to Hospitality Lane, they're going to run right into these people that are coming out of the canopy or people swinging around. And I'm just wondering if there's any standard or if this is a really large width and I just don't understand scale.
They meet our driveway distance.
Okay.
So yes, but they've got the width there to do it. There was some concern about the location of those tanks and whether or not trucks would be blocking them, but I think the loading and traffic is different enough that, it would be a minor conflict, so.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing I will say though, Renee, just since we're here, the discussion about the throat length, it is required to be a maximum width throat 30 feet into this site, and you see how this kind of bulbs out. The idea behind the throat is to control traffic a certain amount of distance into the site so that you don't have kind of chaos here. That is what we're talking about. They need to extend that 30 feet from this line here, and they don't currently have it. So these are the design things that they need to work on. You can also see here's the buffer line right here. It's supposed to be a 50-foot buffer. Well, the buffer ends there. I mean, we got to fix that.
Right.
That's just.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what kind of signs can be put up for that? Because I understand it's not supposed to be visible from Fall Hill. That's why the buffer and everything is there. But by code, what are they allowed to put? I mean, obviously not the Central Park sign there, probably that tall.
It's a good question, Renee. Let me get to the, I knew I brought this book for a reason. Individual uses within the PDC may be permitted the following signs. Building signs equal to 1 square foot per each linear foot of building circumference, but not to exceed 200 square foot of sign face per building side. A monument sign not to exceed 10 feet in height and 100 square feet in sign area. A monument sign not to exceed 10 feet in height. Okay, that's it. Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all in the sign section of the Unified Development Ordinance.
And that won't be in conflict with the side agreement?
Which section of the side agreement are you talking
Well,
about?
just the.
Oh, about the buffer?
Yeah, sorry.
About having a sign within the buffer?
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, except for the applicant when we get to that point.
Anybody else?
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. O'Toole?
Mike, I'm a little confused about this public hearing tonight. This is one piece of property.
Yes, sir.
There's 2 proposed uses, and they're separate.
Yes, sir.
And the first one we have before us now is for the automobile. And they're the ones that are asking for the access easement, even though it's gonna be a dual purpose for the 7-Eleven. And really, it's the access for 7-Eleven it is for the automotive.
It's a shared.
I don't really
yeah.
understand
Okay.
how we're doing this separately together.
Well, Mr. O'Toole, it is 2 different special use applications, and so that necessitates 2 different votes. If the chairman wishes, with your commission's agreement, to go ahead and open the second public hearing and consider them simultaneously, that would be a perfectly appropriate thing to do. We still would ask you to take 2 separate votes because they're 2 separate uses, but a combined public hearing would be a very reasonable thing to do if you wish to do that.
So,
But to further, they're gonna do a boundary line adjustment. There'll be 3 parcels
Yes, sir.
out of this.
And there will be a access easement, shared access, so
Right,
that.
but you have to have access easements to make all this work.
Yes, sir, and I can show you again on the map, I think maybe just to look at your, here we go, right here. See this solid line here? That delineates an access easement that would be to the benefit of this property and this property. So we actually have a standard. If this access only served the 7-Eleven, it's not permitted, but since it does serve multiple properties, that's what we ask for. That's the planning standard we ask for, and they have shown that access easement here. Right through there. They've actually submitted an infrastructure plan for that as well, for review as just a general site plan. No uses, just the access.
and Mr. O'Toole, as Mr. Craig said, that was a difference as I was trying to determine, should we take them separately or together? And actually, it probably works better if we do them together because of this particular entry-exit way right here.
Yeah, with Tom, I want to hitchhike on what he said, because when I saw this, I thought, well, what if we said I to one and no to the other? I mean, the whole thing blows up. I mean, that's why I couldn't understand why
Sure.
they were 2 separate proposals.
And these are special use permits, so,
I
you
understand
can recommend conditions. It's not a rezoning, you don't have to wait for something to be proffered. Again, outside of this access issue, they're both perfectly reasonable uses for frontage road, like Fall Hill Avenue. And if you all were to, be inclined to say that there was a condition on approval that you couldn't have the access, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could approach this issue. Whether or not the uses would be viable at that point, that's a good question too.
And my other concern is we're being asked to review something tonight that's not technically adequate, and the applicant hasn't responded to those, and so we're gonna table it.
Yes.
We
But
couldn't vote on it tonight if we wanted to.
you could.
Yeah.
You could
Theoretically,
You
I
could
mean-
say, hey, we don't
Well,
want
no,
this
but
at
I mean
all.
theoretically, that, you want the applicant to respond, obviously.
You're correct, and I also wanted to make sure that we had adequate time to discuss this issue. This is a big issue, this access, and it's not gonna change. This isn't what they're being asked to change by our department. I mean, you saw our position is that the side agreement, if you all are requiring this access, if they would like this access, the city council has to change their policy. And at a minimum, you know, if that's the will of the commission and the city council, we need to really look closely at that access point to make sure that it's minimized. We want to start that conversation now. The stuff about sidewalks on Hospitality Lane, if they do it, they meet all our technical requirements, great. Then we can move forward. If not, we'll recommend denial. I mean, you know, we're not gonna fight over it. It's just, you know, I believe them to be working on that in good faith. They're minor things.
But when you're asking for, what exactly are you looking for from the planning commission relative to the access?
Do you think that they should be able to break that berm and have an access point, Tom?
That's what you're asking the planning commission,
Yes, sir.
to break again, say that again?
Let me go to the map, make sure I got the
Break,
map up
to
here.
break what?
So we've got a requirement for this green area here to be a 50-foot wide berm, 50-foot wide landscape buffer with the berm. And is it appropriate to permit an access here? And knowing that it will cross the trail, and it will cross this berm, and seeing the overall traffic pattern, there's no access here, there's no access
All the way down.
all the way to here. There's a break for Gordon Shelton. The berm ends here, and then there is an access here. This is the Sheets right here, and this is the Bill Buttram building, and they have that same kind of idea. It's a shared access that gets you over to this bank too. So that's wanted us to at least get used to this idea. If you guys have direction to give the applicant, that's great. If you need to think about it and defer it, you can do that. I mean, but I thought it was important to start talking about this now. And then we've got a month to go through and get the plans.
But it's still a right in and right out, and we're not doing it,
Absolutely.
we're not changing any of that.
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
There's a hard surface median right here.
Right.
We're not breaking
We're not
that.
changing that.
Nope. And that would change the calculus. It would no longer meet the location criteria. VDOT requires an entrance right in, right out to be 250 feet from that intersection, from this intersection. So this is a full service intersection that the city is actively working on signalizing. This right in, right out partial access intersection has to be 250 feet away. They're 292 feet away, so that's good. The uses, the nature of the uses in here require a 100-foot taper and a 100-foot turn. You guys saw the traffic study in your packet. They've provided that, so that's good. The only deficiency is once you look at the actual geometry of the entrance itself, that needs work. Not only from a technical standpoint, from VDOT standards, but also, and this is more about our ordinance section that says we need a comprehensive transportation network of bikes and cars, and this sign agreement thing. Both of those things, are we going to permit a cross of the bike trail and a cross of this berm, or not? And then what character does that have? Those are kind of things to work out.
To expand upon your question a little bit, the applicant is going to stand up and say, we think it's okay that we cross through this berm with this access easement, that the text does not
I hope so.
prohibit that. And so we're in hopes at the very minimum that they will address these geometric issues and bring you back a plan that at least from a geometric standpoint makes some sense. And then you're going to take an action to council, and either you will recommend approval and say, yes, we think going through the buffer area with an access point is okay to these standards, or you're going to say, no, we recommend the commission not approve this special use with this form of access, and then it will all go up to council, and the council will have to make that final, determination. I just want to lay that out, make sure everyone's.
Yeah, I just want to get back to another clarification. Are we going to actually make a motion for this recommendation, or how?
What we're suggesting
Not
is
tonight.
that tonight you defer this, you hear the applicant's argument,
action.
consider that.
Go back to sleep.
We do think it needs to be worked on some more in order to get in better shape. And then after you've had time to hear the applicant's position on this, you need to consider that and bring it back at your July meeting. And there may be members of the public as well who may have comments in addition, and to hear their comments. And then to come back at your July meeting, hopefully they will have a revised plan before you. And right now, from our perspectives, there's two reasons to say no. Number one, we don't think there should be a driveway through this berm area. And number two, even what they're proposing, we don't think is sufficient. And so they may address the second item, and then so that we'll maybe have to focus in on the first item. If they don't revise it, and we end up with the exact same plan, then a month from now, then we will have, staff will have 2 reasons to say no.
Well,
Or
but
recommend no.
let me just clarify his question, though. Should there be a motion this evening, or can it be a voice vote just to defer?
You can take a voice vote to
That's what,
defer.
I think that's what he wants to make sure that you
Yes, sir.
clarify. Okay.
Thank you very much.
It should be a motion. I mean, it should be a motion to take over.
Yeah,
Right, but it doesn't have to be the board, it could be a voice. That's what I'm at. I think,
No, I would ask that you make a motion, that we
Okay.
move that we table the matter.
okay,
It's my opinion that commissions and boards, even when they're tabling an item, should do
Okay.
that with a straightforward motion.
and I accept that counsel right now.
Hey, Tom, I was just going to mention too, we also don't have any information on the third parcel, which is going to be sharing the lots as well. So that,
That's true, we don't know, the applicant has not determined what.
I mean,
use of that
they could
property.
have a high-traffic business that's, even if it's an office, you know, like a cellular customer store or something like that, and you might have all kinds of traffic. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to hearing from the applicant and the citizens. I think that would be helpful, because I feel like we're leaning towards one way already, but would look forward to hearing some new information.
All right. Mr. Pete?
Sure. It's my understanding that this parcel, excuse me, is currently zoned PDC, is that correct? Is that true for all of the Celebrate Virginia parcel?
Yes, sir.
Property? And for that district, the, what does the PD stand for?
Planned development.
Well, what's the plan here for this whole project, and how does this fit in to an overall scheme for this entire tract?
This rezoning was approved in, you may know the year better than I do, and I think 95 or 96, without a plan. 98. So there's no proffered general development plan. They relied on the standards of the PDC zoning district. Subsequently, in 2005, they did come back in some context, and I'm not clear on exactly the context, and did adopt this side agreement. So the side agreement fills in as a somewhat general development plan, and it includes this provision about the berm.
But when this was created, I mean, and I haven't gone back and looked at the UDO, but I thought that the concept behind a planned development district was that you would have it would be developed as a whole with common elements of infrastructure, signage. At one point, you know, this was to be the Kalahari thing and a tourist destination, and there were all these plans. And that's why it was put together as a unified project. And it seems to me that in the years since then, the planned part has fallen away, so that now it really doesn't resemble a planned district at all. And I really wonder whether before anything more gets done out there, that we revisit that entire district and see what would be the appropriate land use and zoning for this property, because now it appears to me that there is no plan. And I don't think it's consistent with our comprehensive plan, just for that reason. I mean, now I think there have been some other things out there that are equally unplanned, but that doesn't mean we need to continue doing it. And also, I wasn't part of the side agreement. What do you see as the overall purpose of that?
Well, the overall purpose, that's a good question. Let me read the purpose statement. Got it in here.
Oh, and I also wanted to ask, are the taxes current on this property?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you.
Well, Mr. Pates, there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 whereases that are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. About 13 that kind of ascribe a purpose for this. This was an agreement done after a rezoning. The time to catch kind of the planning in the plan development would have been at the time of the rezoning in 1998. And there were no proffers associated with this, which is very interesting for a plan development, because usually you would have a general development plan and a set of conditions with that.
Right. So what do you think was the intent of this side agreement?
I think the whereas state that intent, Mr. Bates, you don't have to read them, but it goes on for a page and a half. Long process of distributed.
This is also a legal document, you know, that's an agreement between the city and the landowner. I feel confident in administering the conditions relate to the land development, but we are more geared to looking at the purpose of proffers in zoning districts than we would be in a legal document.
Yes, but I think it is a very unusual document, okay? And I'm sure that it was put together for several purposes, some of which are listed there, but it even talks about recording restrictive covenants to exclude certain uses for the property. And does it include, it includes all of Celebrate Virginia? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, there are things listed like repair service establishments, and the application, this first one, I guess this first one is 5C, right? Yeah. Is that right? This is called parcel 5C. Is that the first one of these that we're looking at, or that's the
Yes.
second one?
Nope, you've got the right one.
Okay. What is this facility exactly?
An automotive service use. That's a
Well, no,
valve-
what's proposed here? What
Valvoline.
exactly? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a car repair.
Well, isn't that one of the excluded uses?
The side agreement permits one. And this is the one. So, I mean, it's contemplated in the agreement that they would have one of these uses. And we wrote that in the staff report too. And this is it.
Well, now, I'm looking at item 2 in the side agreement. The following uses shall not be permitted on the parcels, okay? Auto rental, wholesale use, churches, warehouses, repair service establishments. Does this not qualify as a repair service establishment?
It does, but you need to read number 3.
Number 3. I told you I hadn't done all my homework. That's why I'm asking all these questions.
It's a complex document, for sure.
Yeah, that's why we need to look at it. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Shall,
And they can also put the 7-Eleven there, because there's no.
okay, well, let's see. No more than one. Limit the number of repair services to not more than one for a period of 50 years from the date of this agreement. Okay. So, once this Valvoline place goes in, that's the only one that would be allowed on the whole, how many acres is it, 150 acres or something?
Yes, sir.
80 Right. I also wanted to ask about this berm. I remember when Celebrate Virginia was first developed, that this berm was seen, and it's not just one, isn't it? I believe there's another one. Isn't there another one along 95?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That the idea was that this project, this comprehensive unified project, would be buffered or shielded from these roads, and that it would reduce noise, it would be attractive, it would be an amenity, if you will, for the project. And it seems to me that it serves those purposes, and they've been there for some time. I can't imagine why we would want to destroy the berm by putting a road right through the middle of it. Why not maybe get rid of the whole berm altogether? If you're going to do that, and then there'll be another one that wants to to stick another driveway or road through there. So it seems to me that a lot of things were done out there to foster a certain type of development. And this seems to be just one more way of ignoring that original intent for the project. I was just curious, was there some reason that this parcel with the 3 different lots on it couldn't be accessed solely from Hospitality Lane?
Yeah, that'd be a good question for the applicant.
Well, I was just curious for you, from a planning standpoint, wouldn't you
Sure.
rather see a single?
Well, we got to find the balance, and like I think Chuck said earlier, we're looking at 2 questions. So what's the purpose of the berm? What does breaking it do? What is it going to negate all those things that you said? Because we agree there was a unified vision set up here, but on the other hand, we're also talking about one access point, and they're tightly controlled. They need to be they can only be made by agreement. So that's a good position to be in. So balancing those 2, what is the material effect of one break? And that's a question for you guys. And then secondly, what does that access mean to those uses? Does a 7-Eleven go there if we don't get that second access point? I'll let the applicant answer that. I've got my own opinion on that. It seems to be a use that's dependent on having an immediate secondary access off the main road. I mean, that would be my thought. But it's a balance. And that's why we want to have this conversation today, so you guys didn't feel in a pinch, in a rush, getting everything thrown at you and having to have a big conversation about the vision for this area and balancing that out. What, in the big picture, what does one access point mean there? So.
Well, that's true with any application, isn't it? Anyway, that's all I have right now.
Any other questions? Mr. Beavers? So before we proceed to the applicant, I just want to make sure that we are looking at both parcels now, because we really have focused on the access, and we've talked about the convenience store. So, so we don't have the applicant up and down. I'm just trying to make sure that, all of what we want to have answered or we're going to question really is about both of these parcels right now.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest you go ahead and read the notice
Okay.
of item 7 and announce that be a public hearing as well, and allow Mike to kind of go through that presentation more fully.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so that we can do that, we also have item number 7, CVAS Properties LLC requests a special use permit in order to construct a convenience store with gasoline sales on portion of GPN 7769-78-7674, the vacant parcel at the northwest corner of the intersection of Fall Hill Avenue and Hospitality Lane in the Planned Development Commercial Zoning District, PDC. Convenience store with gasoline sales are permitted in the PDC zoning district by special use permit. A 2,980 square foot building will be built on the proposed 0.99 acre parcel for the use, which would equate to a 0.07 floor area ratio. The comprehensive plan designates the area for planned development commercial, which has no specific recommended non-residential floor area ratio.
Thank you, sir. I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but if we go to the computer, I will just go over the use on the lot here. There seems to be some lag between the computer, what I'm seeing, and what this computer is showing. Hold on, let me see if I can get that fixed. And I don't. Logan, I don't know if you can help me out back there or not. Anyways, let me just talk through it anyways. So like you said, there's 3 parcels. There was 2 that fronted on Fall Hill Avenue. They're both roughly an acre. The one easternmost immediately adjacent to Hospitality and Fall Hill Avenue was Valvoline. The next one over between that and the Wegmans, the rear of the Wegmans, the loading area for the Wegmans, roughly a 1 acre parcel where the 7-Eleven would be located. Thanks, sir. Mr. Gant, you said it, but it's a 2,960 square foot convenience store. It has 12 gasoline pumps, They're located between the building and Fall Hill Avenue. The use includes 16 parking spaces, which is between 125%. It's 133% of what is required, which is 12 spaces. So this may be approved administratively. Yes, sir. That's it. And really, that's all we've got. Maybe the vision will come up here in a second, but I think we've been looking at it. I think I gave the technical data there, so we can move forward if you'd like.
Commissioners, we're all good?
Hey, there it is.
All right. At this particular time, we'd like to ask the applicant to step to the podium.
Jervis Harrison, Civil Companies, Fredericksburg, Virginia. I don't know where to start. Let me start with when the property was rezoned. It was rezoned in August 11th, 1998, and it was rezoned. The reason why there are no proffers associated with this rezoning, excuse me, is because the city council at the time requested the property owner, came to the property owner, the then property owner, and asked that it rezone the property, the city rezone the property on their own motion in order to create some tax base. Now, what happened after that, so it was a request from the city to the property owner, and the property was rezoned at the motion and at the action of the city council, all right, versus the property owner making a request for rezoning. That's the first thing. The side agreement came about after that because the council and the property owner felt that they could work together to put in some safeguards and to also to address some of the issues related to the overall property, the development, the plan part of it. One of the things that was addressed was the applicant gave all of the property along the riverfront to the Virginia Outdoors Fund. The applicant also built $20 million worth of infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, etc. So that's just sort of somewhat of the history of it. But it wasn't a situation whereby the applicant refused or did not offer up proffers. It was a situation where the council asked the applicant, the owner, let us rezone the property to expedite the development of this because of the need for revenues. So that's sort of the setting that happened with this property. Now let's get back to the berm and the side agreement. Our reading of the side agreement is that it does not prohibit any access off Fall Hill Avenue, not even with the berm. And we are actually currently addressing that. We've actually addressed all of the issues that Mr. Craig and Mr. Johnson has talked about tonight with the throat to the 7-Eleven, and actually added sidewalks to the 7-Eleven to make it safer for cars and pedestrians. We've relocated the, sorry, I'm breathing really fast because I ran up the stairs. We've relocated the tanks. We've done all of the improvements that Mr. Craig indicated was necessary, and not only necessary, but they were improvements to the entrance to make it safer, and basically exactly what the city staff recommended in their TRC. The site agreement does not prohibit access from Fall Hill Avenue, and in fact, the two access points onto Fall Hill Avenue were put in, one by the city, Hospitality Drive, last year and a half ago, after the site agreement. And Gordon W. Shelton Boulevard was also entered into Fall Hill Avenue after the site agreement. And the site agreement was never reviewed or amended to allow for either of those. So we think that that's not, the site agreement is not required to be amended to allow for this right in and right out. And actually, that is being discussed, I think, with the city attorney's office as we speak. Not as a adversarial type of situation, just to make sure that we all agree with what the side agreement does or does not say. But we are making the entrances safe, and our traffic study, we use the same traffic consultant that the city uses, indicates that the right in and right out with the distances, site distances, is absolutely safe and meets VDOT requirements. Additionally, the city has approved other access points on the Fall Hill Avenue across the street, and continues to do that. So, and we can talk more about that at the July public hearing, because we will have our transportation consultant here and our engineers here, and we will also have given to the planning staff the updated versions of the generalized development plans, which addresses all of the staff's comments about entrances and safety and buffers and berms, etc. The side agreement also does not prohibit any break in the buffers. In fact, this is a very, very nice buffer that was done partially with the improvements to Fall Hill Avenue. And it's a buffer that's over and above most buffers that you see along streets. And Mr. Page, it was not a buffer, although I like the idea as a planner, but it was not a buffer to actually shield all the development within the overall project. Because that's impossible, because your UDO height requirements allows up to 90 feet. And your UDO regulations and list of uses have been increased since the rezoning in 1998 to add uses like 7-Eleven and Valvoline. Well, those are already there, but they've added additional automotive related uses in the UDO since the rezone in 1998. So I know I've been rambling a bit, but I wanted to address some of the things that were said tonight, because they're not exactly representative of the way things happened. But that's okay. We can address that more fully and more comprehensively when we provided the revised GDP to you within the next couple of weeks. And you will have a chance to look at that revised GDP before we come into a public hearing, because you guys have just had to depend on what Mike was saying to you, and he did a good job, I think, explaining what was needed to update and revise the initial generalized development plans. But he has not even seen the revisions that we've made. But we have made those revisions, and we're going to get that to him. And we believe that you will see a safe right in and right out. We believe you will see a right in and right out that has interparcel access to these three pieces. And we also think you will see three uses that complement each other within a stretch of Fall Hill Avenue where there's car dealers, gas stations, convenience centers already. And so if these uses are not compatible with the existing pattern of uses or the existing planned uses, I don't know what is. I don't know, I've skipped over some of the things, some of the questions that's come up tonight, but I'd just leave it at that, and just to indicate to you that our entrance will be safe. It will be verified as safe and confirmed as safe by our traffic consultant, who happens to also be the city's traffic consultant. We will relocate the berm and the trail as necessary to make it safe at that entrance. And we will be in compliance with the side agreement, and we believe a decision will be made on that directly. I'll leave it at that, but we will continue this discussion and question answers at the July 11th meeting, I think. But I'd be glad to answer any questions you have tonight as well.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Can you kind of just talk, not with that letting the cat out of the bag, but conceptually, like what you envision the other parcel to?
Third parcel?
Yes, sir.
It's a small parcel. It's interparcel access with these other two uses. It is sort of more fronted on Hospitality Lane versus Fall Hill Avenue. We think it'll probably be a small, low-intensity office-type use. We're not 100% sure. But I can tell you that the Valvoline auto service use, by the way, he said it was a repair service. It is auto service, but they do oil changes and tire rotations, but they don't do major repairs like any body work like that. They're more like the, I guess, the AAA facility right there along the front of the Central Park property, or even Merchant's Tire. Well, it's not even as I think intense as the Merchant's Tire or the National Tire and Battery. But we think it'll be a smaller and a less intensive use. And by the way, the Valvoline automotive services use is also very, it's not that intense in that it has about 40 customers a day, as opposed to the 7-Eleven, which is more intense, as you know, because of the gasoline. But I think it's the uses together, the Valvoline, the 7-Eleven, with the interparcel access from Hospitality Lane out to Fall Hill Avenue, and from Fall Hill Avenue to Hospitality Lane, I think it works well. It works similarly as other interparcel access along that stretch works on both sides of the street.
Could you talk a little bit about, I guess, what your vision is? I mean, I know we'll get the details, but in terms of the path and how you've mitigated that with your new proposal that you're going to submit?
Yeah, I'd like to, what I'll tell you is that we will take safety and pedestrian safety, and as well as vehicular safety into consideration there by redesigning the throat length, making it narrower and more defined, and also adding sidewalks from Fall Hill Avenue into the property along that throat, all as indicated and as commented upon during the TRC meeting with staff. And I think you'll see a much improved and a safer entrance in that right in and right out than you probably see with the initial GDP that was on the board tonight.
Okay. And then my last question is, if it is determined through whatever legal means or interpretation that that the city council would have to make a determination to whether they open up on Fall Hill Avenue, does this project not accomplishable if we do not approve, or if the city doesn't approve Fall Hill Avenue opening?
I don't
in that space, I mean.
I don't believe that the uses, I doubt the uses will be interested in locating there without at least a right in and right out.
Okay. Thank you.
Is it safe to assume that the other 7-Eleven up the street would close with this one opening up? Maybe that's not a fair question to ask you, but.
No, that's a pretty good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll try to have more of a definite answer to that when I come back. You mean the one over on the other side of I-95?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Toole, that's already closed.
It's recently closed.
It has been opened up by the guy that runs the William Street Market, Express Food Mart. He's bought it and transitioned that brand.
So there wouldn't be a possibility that could be expanded and do the same thing, obviously.
Believe me, we've tried that before.
Yeah, well,
Tried to
just-
expand existing 7-Elevens and add the
Yeah,
gasoline.
yeah.
They're not interested in that, or doesn't appear to be interested in that.
Thank you.
But I hope, Mr. Chairman, I hope I was able to bring a little of the history of the overall zoning of the property and sort of the intent. It really was a partnership between the city council then and the owner of the property then and now in an effort to try to generate revenue to the city, who had a list of projects that they wanted to do like this and revenue like that. And there's a few people in here that was around at that time that understood that. I mean,
Including you, Jervis, including you.
I mean, we used to budget one block of a sidewalk a year because we didn't have a lot of revenue
We don't even do that now.
to generate it in order to brick sidewalks downtown. We used to do one block a year because we had to make the money stretch. And in fact, that was the atmosphere at the time. We were looking for ways to generate revenue for the city to do waterfront parks and sewer plant expansions and water plant expansions and trails planning. And that's the reason for all of that. But if you look at the side agreement, it's not a one-sided side agreement. You'll see all throughout that side agreement, if you pay attention to it, where the owner of the property contributes money towards the infrastructure that serves not only the owner, that's fair, but also a larger general purpose. And one example of that is the I think couple of hundred acres of land that was donated to the Virginia Outdoors Foundation between where you see the development along Central Park and Celebrate Virginia and the river. All
So,
of
sir,
that is protected land.
And I feel that you've explained all that.
Okay.
Okay? And any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I do have one. I wanted to go back, and I think you've already answered this implicitly, that why couldn't this project work with a single entrance off Hospitality Drive? It's all driven by the economic, the prospects here that you have for the development, right?
I think for the most part it is. However, and I'll let our transportation consultant elaborate on this at the July meeting, but I don't believe that our transportation consultant would consider a single access off of Hospitality Drive to serve these three uses any safer. In fact, I believe he would recommend both access points, the one off Hospitality Drive and the right in and right out off of Fall Hill Avenue, to make each of the uses safer. The more access ways in and out, the better. Being the general thesis there.
Do we have a vehicle trip analysis yet?
We do.
Yeah.
And it was submitted already, and
How many cars trips is this going to generate a day?
I knew you were going to ask that question. We've got it in the packet.
It's a lot.
Well, I can tell you the customers a day. I mean, 7-Eleven, you're talking about 800 to 1,000 a day. Valvoline, about low 40s a day. And then, of course, you've got the other use. But of course, they got them broken down. Net external trips, weekday traffic, 580 in and out. So, I mean, it's manageable, and the access in and out from Fall Hill Avenue, plus the access, interparcel access through to Hospitality Lane, makes it manageable, and our transportation study indicates that. And oh, by the way, we also are required to participate in the traffic signal that's going at the intersection of Hospitality Drive and Fall Hill Avenue as part of this overall development. That's also in the side agreement. So the side agreement, again, is not a one-side side agreement. It's a partnership.
But I guess to extend Mr. Pate's question, though, and given the way the diagram looks, wouldn't you agree that, I mean, the bulk of the traffic is Fall Hill, and you will have those folks coming through from the Valvoline really going over to Fall Hill. So that really is going to be a challengeable area.
Well, I would agree that the bulk of the traffic will be Fall Hill Avenue, but as importantly is you have 500 hotel rooms already inside that need this type of service. You got a Wegmans that need this type of service that is inside that gets to this project from Hospitality Lane,
When you say needs this service, you mean the Valvoline,
the Valvoline and the 7-Eleven, unless they use the
unless
Sheets.
Sheets.
Unless they use
Okay.
sheets. But my point is, there are internal uses currently inside Celebrate Virginia. You have apartments, you have more apartments proposed, you have Wegmans, you have 3 hotels, you have the Expo Center, all of which come from inside the project through Hospitality Lane and around through Fall Hill Avenue to get to these uses. So my point is, I believe the best case is to have both access points, given that. You don't want all of the internal uses to go to Fall Hill Avenue to get there, no.
So,
And you don't want them to all access the property from Hospitality Lane, is it?
okay, but, so if you could, when you come back, this is a very good discussion.
Right.
And I would just ask, if you go down to where Gordon Shelton is, where the Wegmans entrance is, and you know how it goes out on the back side over there?
Yes.
I can guarantee you that if you do a traffic study there, there's more traffic that comes off of Fall Hill going into Wegmans than comes off the back side of that street over there. Which means,
I agree with that. You're gonna
which
get
means
the
that
Wegmans.
when you put this right in, right out, you actually have added or increased considerably more traffic going in that short span of roadway.
No, that's fair.
Okay,
That's
all
fair.
right. And all those folks still live back there.
That's right. And as you know, well, I think you know, there are 578 apartments that have been approved for the site across from Wegmans. These are luxury apartments. And these are apartments that would be able to access these uses from Hospitality Lane and also from Fall Hill Avenue if the right in and right out is approved. My point is there's going to be some not intensive, but some significant uses from the internal part that would use Hospitality Lane, and just having Hospitality Lane only as the access point would also not be, I think, a desirable situation as well.
Okay, but I would just caution you on what the example you just used, because if you're coming across Noble Way, I don't think you want to make that left to go into that right entry. You want to keep going across the Hospitality Lane and come in and around that way. Just my own thought, so.
Understood, and that's
Okay.
where we're adding the traffic light
Okay,
right there. That's why that intersection has been signalized, and we are obligated to participate in that signal.
no,
Right.
and that's in the side agreement.
Yes,
Which you said, hey, not everything in the side agreement.
it's not one-sided, right?
Okay,
Just most of it.
Thank you.
all right, so, well, nothing else, I guess we can hear from the public. And I would ask that anyone that has a public comment, when you come to the podium, name, address, and then please adhere to the timing aspects by the lights that are there on the podium.
Mr. Chairman, I'm George Solly, 1303 Caroline Street in the city. My interest in this project is centered around the effect of the project on the pathway, on the trail that runs up Fall Hill. I certainly understand the applicant's desire to take a piece of property that's currently not being used and make some use of it. I certainly understand the city's desire to have more revenue producing commercial property in the city. I am concerned, though, anytime that there is development which adds vehicular traffic crossing pedestrian and bicycle trails. And so I was very happy to hear Mr. Craig highlight that as an issue to be dealt with. I was happy to hear the applicant has taken request and worked on it, and look forward to seeing what the results of that is. But I do want to point out a couple of things to the Planning Commission. When you have a development that results in vehicular traffic, additional vehicular traffic crossing a trail, you have two aspects, I think, that are really important to consider. One is that specific site and the safety of that specific site and how that affects the use of that trail. Can't really comment too much on that right now because we don't have the plans for that crossing, that right in, right out that's been discussed. But when you do get the plans, I urge you to consider the effect on the pedestrians and the cyclists who will be using that route. The second consideration is more of a macro consideration. When you have a trail, when a city or any municipality plans and adopts and spends the money to construct a trail, they're providing a safe route for people who are not in motor vehicles to move from point A to point B, whether that's for recreational use or whether it is to get to shopping areas or schools or recreational facilities or what have you. And they do that by taking it off the street and putting it in a safer environment. The more you interrupt that trail, the less safe you are making it. The less safe you make it, the less people will actually see that as an amenity and a safe way to do what it is that they really want to use the trail to do. I'm not saying in this case that that's a showstopper necessarily, but I do think it's important that the Planning Commission consider those two aspects when you come back in June and between now and then when you're deliberating on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'm Ann Little, 726 William Street in the city. We heard a really wonderful presentation just earlier in the meeting about trails and how we're building our amenities. I happen to have worked with George Solly on the first trail iteration that we did way back 2008, I think. And it was all thought about as far as how we're going to connect people and how could people drive to work on a bike or even walk to work. Last spring and this last fall and the spring, we put trees along the trail starting at Friendsible at Rappahannock all the way up to have shade so people could walk and use these trails. Saw a lot of people doing that. The high school kids were running up there. They ran all the way up to Wegmans and ran all the way back down. We saw them every day. And then the other day, I was working on trees over on Lafayette Avenue, right by a 7-Eleven. In the course of 15 minutes, I just stood there and counted because I knew this was coming up. In the course of 15 minutes, 20 cars went in and out of there. And not only did they go in and out of there, they practically ran us down because they're trying to get out of there. They're in a hurry. They're getting their gas. They're getting their coffee. They also have destroyed that whole area around there. If you go down and look at that, it's all dug out. We can't put trees there because they've run them all down. So that's a kind of a real consideration. And you think about when you're going to be pulling out in traffic, you're not going to stay back behind that trail. You're going to pull out on the trail, right? Because you're going to want to make sure that you can see the traffic, because that traffic moves on Fall Hill Avenue. And so what are you going to do? You're going to pull out there, and then the bicyclist and the lady with the baby is going to have to stop. And if I just did a real quick calculation here, and when Mr. Hurston said he had 1,100 crossings in a day, and I thought, well, 6 of those hours aren't real heavy, right? So let's say 1,000 crossings in a day. And all of a sudden, you're looking at some really big numbers. Say you had 1,000, so there's 55 in an hour. So that's 1 every minute. So you've got somebody coming in and out of there every minute from morning till night trying to use that area. He also suggested that they could make this safer. And the only thing I can think of to make it safer is to put a bridge over the top. Because I don't care how many sidewalks you put in and how many go out, you're still going to have traffic screaming in and out of there and trying to get out because the Fall Hill Avenue traffic is moving 45, 50 miles an hour. They're going to be clipping across that trail and possibly making some dangerous for everybody. The other thing I want to make a point of is there is 2 blocks away, there's a major Sheetz. Why do we need another gas station 2 blocks away from another gas station? Is there that much more? Are we going to pilfer off the amount of revenue from the Sheetz, and then we have no more revenue in the city? We just have 2 different facilities using that revenue. You mentioned, they also mentioned the car dealers do cross the path. They don't cross the path. They're on the other side of Fall Hill Avenue. There are no real crossings other than the roads that are there. And again, we worked down by the old 7-Eleven that was there, and they're not selling gasoline. That was just a convenience store, and many people walk there. There's also wonderful crossings all across Fall Hill Avenue, all the way up and down the road to allow pedestrians to access it. So the city has really worked to give pedestrian access, and now we're destroying it again. And I really wonder why we're doing this. I think that's all I have to say, but I hope you really consider denying this application. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Elaine Calendar of Stafford County. I did not expect to speak here tonight. I was here for another purpose. But this topic interests me a great deal. And as a citizen who drives up Fall Hill Avenue at least a few times a week on the way to Wegmans or out to wherever, Central Park. We use Fall Hill Avenue often. I have been so impressed with the improvements that were made. It used to be we would see pedestrians walking along that narrow bridge, and we would pray that they would make it across. You've made such wonderful improvements there, and I want to congratulate you for that. However, I have noticed that traffic is backing up on Fall Hill Avenue. A lot of times it's around where your circle is. But the idea of adding access at the berm there concerns me a great deal. I support what the previous speaker said regarding pedestrians. I also think that you have a nice complex of hotels right there. And what you should be doing is putting some businesses in that enhance the tourism experience. I know in Stafford we have a zillion 7-Elevens. It doesn't make for a good tourism experience. It occurred to me that there might be someone staying in a hotel whose car broke down, and they might like to have their car repaired nearby. However, that isn't even the type of repair shop you're putting in. They're talking about putting in. They're talking about oil changes or something. So anyway, think about the tourism experience. Think about the safety for pedestrians. Think about the traffic you already have on Fall Hill Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Now, I just want to clarify, I believe I give the applicant an opportunity to respond to a couple of these?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if there's no other than the applicant?
The only extra comment I wanted to make is, there was a comment about the number of cars and customers coming to the 7-Eleven, and I had mentioned 800 to 1,000 a day, but keep in mind that's a 24-hour a day use, and that's one of the reasons why. So they're scattered over 24 hours, although I think you should keep that in mind when you look at that they don't all come at the same time or at They're scattered over a 24-hour period as opposed to Valvoline, which is open like 10 hours a day. So I think you should take that in consideration when you're talking about customers and trips and traffic and pedestrians. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, so before us right now, we have to do it separately, but we have the recommendation from the staff about deferment, and I would start with the Valvoline, and if it is indeed your pleasure that we defer to the July 11th meeting, I'd entertain a motion in a second.
I'll motion to table this until the next planning commission meeting.
I second it.
Okay, I'm gonna run over here because we need to click. Please cast your votes. Motion carries. 6 votes. All right.
Should just stayed over here.
Huh?
Looking forward to see you run over there again.
Because you got to do the next
Oh,
one.
I get it. I'll just go over here. Thank you, sir. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion for the convenience store.
I'll make a motion to table that to the next meeting.
And can I have a second, please?
Second?
All right, please cast your votes.
Okay.
All right, thank you. That motion carries also. At this particular time, I'd like to return the gavel to the chairman, Mr. Harnick, and I will move on swiftly.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Next item on the agenda is Steve DeFalco, Tradition Homes, requests an amendment to special exceptions for general density to redevelop 506 to 516 Sophia Street in the commercial downtown CD district. Development plan is to demolish 3 existing buildings containing 13 townhouse units on 506 to 516 Sophia Street and a .52 acre parcel fronting along Sophia Street, and redevelop the site with 13 new townhouse units in 2 structures. I'm not going to read about the previously granted items. So is this you, Mr. Craig? Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Yes,
You're
thank you, sir.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you. As you indicated, this is amending a special exception for density. A special exception has been granted twice on this property so far, and we have a new property owner, and so we're going to do it a 3rd time. Hopefully this will be the charm. We're going to review the existing conditions. We're going to talk about the previous approvals, what's being proposed now, and our recommendation. This property is located between Caroline and Sophia Streets. It is in particular the square area in this area is the focus of it. It includes this rear parking area of the Fredericksburg Square development, and then these are the existing residential structures that would be demolished. So that is the general area. Again, here we have Sophia Street. The city's parking garage is on the top side up here. Train station down here below to give a general orientation. The previous plan, this is the Fredericksburg Square building, Caroline Street, Sophia Street. The previous plan had access coming off of Sophia and then a total of 3 townhouses. And at one point, there was
9 units.
9 apartments, and then that was modified. So we are now at a point where we started with 7 townhouses and 7 multifamily. That was approved in 2016. 2017, we went from 7 townhouses to 9 multifamily, and now we're going back to 13 townhouses. So we're returning to a density proposed lower than what was originally approved back in 2016. There's 13 units on the property, equates to the density currently on the property. The layout would be modified slightly. The access coming off of Sophia would be shifted to the north side of the property here, and then a driveway down the middle, and you'd have then 7 units fronting directly on Sophia and 7 units fronting on the alley. A simpler layout, a lower density. The recommendation is for approval. There were a series of conditions that are on the staff report that are echoing the previous conditions that were established in terms of the nature of the use, the various approvals. I would note that this change was primarily driven by the ARB review of the property, ARB concerns about the height and nature of the structures, and the applicant's response to lower the height of the structures and to simplify the diversity of uses to simply the townhouses that are being proposed. The applicant is here to answer any questions. I will respond to any questions you have at this point in time.
Anyone have comments? Mr. O'Toole?
Yes, Mr. Johnson, the layout of these 13 townhouses, do they have driveways, or where do they park? Does they have garages underneath the,
Yes, sir. If we could go back to the
I'm a little confused on the plan view.
each of these units has a 2-car garage accessed on the ground floor. So all these units have 2 parking spaces on the ground floor with garage doors that front on the alley. There's a sidewalk on one side connecting here on the southeast side, coming out to the sidewalk along Sophia. So there is pedestrian access, vehicular access, in addition, then cross-access allowed to make provision directly into the Fredericksburg Square property at a future date.
And how wide will that alleyway be? The river?
All these alleyways are 24 feet wide, meeting the fire department standards in order to provide an ability for their trucks to service the area. And that is the driveway itself at 24 feet wide. Then there's the additional 5-foot pedestrian sidewalk with a concrete stamp pattern as an additional area for servicing the bridge for vehicles.
Will there be parking allowed on that?
No, so there's no parking allowed on this alleyway. There would be, the additional parking provision would be either in the general area of Sophia or elsewhere.
If you come to visit somebody in lot 13, you can't park on his lot, you have to go someplace else to
Yes.
park?
Kind of consistent with the previous approved plans. There was no internal parking except for the apartment building. Is that correct?
I didn't remember that. Do they put up no parking signs, or how is that enforced?
Yes, there would be no parking signs, and they would have to do their own internal enforcement.
And those are private, those aren't public roads, are they?
These are private roads built to public alleyway standards.
Right. But the city doesn't maintain them, so
Does
they
not.
need an HOA or something?
They will need some sort of joint agreement, yes, to maintain these roads, streets, alleys.
Alleyways, okay. So that's required when they submit the record plat or something?
Yes, sir.
And would these be rental units? Or these-
Well, I think the applicant should respond. My understanding is they're going to be offered for sale, but the applicant's here and he can respond to them.
Okay. Because the apartments were supposed to be rentals, were they not?
I believe they were condos, but again, the applicant can respond to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Rodriguez?
I'm just trying to get a sense of, so where it says the proposed gate, is that where they have that like side area next to that blue house? Is that, or where is that?
No, that is, let me go back to the aerial photo.
Yeah, that's
That new alley would be roughly along this north property line. Fredericksburg Square, there's an open area to the relatively north side and to the generally
Right.
south side. And this would sort of line up more or less in the middle.
Okay, so basically, like along the red line, that would be an alleyway?
Right, yes, sir.
Okay, and as part of this, is the 512 property, that will not be part of this?
That is not part of this project. That would be
Okay.
another
Okay.
development proposal.
All right, and so, is it my understanding that that part of the project, they're trying to propose a hotel for that? To change the use from what it is now, or did I make that up?
There's some discussion about it.
Okay. In its current capacity, though, what is required for that building in terms of parking? Because you're getting rid of their entire parking lot that they use for all of their functions.
They have, as part of their previous approvals, were required to work out parking provisions, which was an agreement that was completed.
Right, I remember, they got access to the Marriott where the entire city staff is supposed to park, who's using all the administrative buildings, including in this building, right?
Right.
Okay.
And as a
So
user
there's
of that
no-
lot,
so there-
I can tell you it's half empty.
Right, so there's no parking that would be for this business that's operating on 512 once this deal is, like, whatever happens here,
Right,
correct?
this property has all been sold off and is separated
Okay.
from.
All right, I just want, when we look at this, we need to look at the big picture of what we're doing downtown. And there is no street parking on the left side of Sophia, or can you?
Correct, correct.
Okay, so that's another issue. Let's see, talk about it. And is there anything in terms of the city about garages facing the street? There's no,
There are limits in terms of access directly onto the street, but more importantly, the Historic District Review, the ARB, is very concerned about garages fronting on streets. And
Right.
so that's why, one of the many reasons why the garage access is internal.
okay. I was just wondering about that, because on one of these proposed street views, you can see, I guess what would be Unit 8, you can see the garage or Lot 8, I should say. So I was just wondering about that, because in the diagram, you can see that.
Well, I don't think you can make garages totally invisible. I mean, it's.
Well, I'm asking, if they only put 12 and they didn't build Lot 8, you wouldn't see that garage at all. Yeah. Right.
It's not on Sophia, it's one of the rear.
Is that the Wolf Street scene? So, and that would be my other question too. Is there going to be like a fence put up between the properties that abut it from Wolf Street, or?
Yes, there is a stipulation that the fence that runs around the perimeter of the property would be maintained.
Okay. So, but there would be no changes to it. It would just be what's there now. So.
And if it's removed, it would be replaced as a solid fence, yes.
Okay. And then also, I didn't go to the ARB meeting last night. Could you share with me or with us what their comments were about this project, since they?
Well, they acted, at their May 14th meeting, they approved the mass and scale of this.
But I thought I read it, there were some additional questions that they were still going to talk about?
The details, but that's sort of pending your all's action.
Oh, okay. I thought the meeting was yesterday or Monday. No? Okay.
There was a meeting yesterday, but I don't believe this wasn't on the agenda.
Oh, okay. All right. I must have just read the packet then. That's all I got.
Yes, I just have a couple. Has the city staff heard anything?
Mr. Page, you want to turn your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry. Has the staff heard anything about this application from the abutting property owners?
No, we've received no comment.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any other questions, comments? The applicant like to speak to this proposal?
Sorry, a little under the weather. Steve DeFalco, I'm from Arlington, 2704 North Buchanan Street. I think we've covered a lot here, but I did hear a couple questions. I think about the condo building before. It was planned to be a condo building. It was not planned to be a rental building. And In terms of the garage, there will be some viewpoint of that garage, but I think the majority of it, from most of the angles, would be hidden from, the Sophia Street walkways. So I just wanted to answer those two questions.
Can I ask you a question? Do you have any concerns over being able to market and sell these with the limited parking that you have with the garages? I mean, is that a concern at all that you have? Because it is pretty limited.
Not really. We have a similar project up in Herndon, Virginia right now with a similar type of situation where the parking is within the unit and it's just public street parking access, and we have not had any issues with resident visitor parking. It's just not been a comment we've heard from the buyers.
Anybody have questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll open up the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this issue, please come up.
Hi, I'm Kelly Barnes from 106 Wolf Street, and I'm here on behalf of Alan Ross Gibson, who owns 106 Wolf Street, 108 Wolf Street, and 110 and 112 Wolf Street. And the original plans, Miss Ellen Ross was not, there was a couple of concerns that she had, but with the new proposed plans that Steve DeFalco has developed, she's in favor of, and she's really pleased with the changes that he's come up with.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnes. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the Planning Commission. Any further questions or action? I need someone to do something.
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we accept the recommendation along with the items that have been specified in the document.
Staff's conditions.
Staff's conditions.
I'll second Mr. Gantz's motion, please.
Any further discussion?
Yes. I plan to vote in favor of the motion. I'm not at all crazy about the project. From the very beginning, I think it's very unfortunate that the city is approving the demolition of historically significant and architecturally unusual building along Sophia Street. I think there are problems with the height of the project and how it impedes and interferes with the light of the abutting property owners, the design of it. However, on the other hand, I think it has improved some from where it was, a year or so ago. And this application before us actually reduces the density a little bit from what had been approved before. But I think we, as a city, need to be more careful about a lot of our redevelopment in the historic district. That's all.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I plan to vote against this, and the reason is because I don't feel that there's adequate parking in the downtown area. I know I'm in the minority with all the studies that we paid for, but I don't think it exists. And to put another project and put 13 homes with no guest parking, no access, there's on that side of the street, in front of those homes that have the walk-up access, you can't park a car there. So then what do we say? We say that they'll go to the municipal lot. Well, you've already got the other business, 512 ostensibly, who's got the parking garage reserved for if they were to have a function. And when would people mostly visit? In the evening and on the weekends. So I just foresee us creating more traffic issues, more unsafe things. And so I do not want to support this for that reason. I think it's good to have a development there. But when you're actually like, for the 512 space, I mean, they had a lot of parking in the back. It was good for weddings and stuff like that. But now, if you take all of that parking away, it reduces our availability for that. And so I'm not going to support this.
Any further comments? Okay. The motion and second were made to recommend approval with staff conditions, so please cast your votes. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. Good luck. That concludes our public hearings for the night. The next item on our agenda is a presentation by Virginia Organizing, Mr. Bob Straight. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your patience in waiting out all of the public hearings we had tonight to give your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I believe I was allocated 10 minutes. Bob Straight. I do not reside in Fredericksburg. I live at 5 South Point Lane, which is the south side or the south end of Stafford County. But I'm here as a representative of Virginia Organizing to address with you a current and growing issue associated with the availability of affordable housing within both Fredericksburg and the larger Planning District 16, of which Fredericksburg is a part. No, here we, all right, hang on. Okay, let's skip that slide, please. Next. Okay, Virginia Organizing. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit grassroots organization that engages in community organizing that is both multi-issue and multi-constituency with a focus on people who have traditionally had little voice in society. We are the Fredericksburg chapter of Virginia Organizing is one of 11 chapters working within the state of Virginia. Next slide, please. Affordable housing. We recognize that there is a broad spectrum of Virginians who are negatively impacted by the scarcity of affordable housing. Within that spectrum, Virginia Organizing is oriented on the availability of affordable housing within Planning District 16, of which, as we know, Fredericksburg is a part, for those households with an annual income between $24,000 per year, which is the federal poverty level for a family of 4, and $61,000 per year, which is the Virginia household survival budget for a family of 4 inclusive. These households are known as the Alice population, and we'll cover Alice population in just 1 second. So why are we bringing this before you, the Fredericksburg Planning Commission? We have several purposes for this: to generate greater public awareness of this issue, specifically affordable housing. We also are looking for allies in our effort to address this issue within Planning District 16. I can only guess that one or more of you, and perhaps you collectively, know of someone, perhaps even a relative, who is grappling with the issue of affordable housing. Whether it's a youngster, a young adult who's living in the basement or in the bedroom he or she grew up in as a child, or a senior citizen who has income but is having a hard time grappling with prohibitive cost of renting, much less owning, property within Planning District 16. And lastly, we bring it before you because as a Planning Commission, you advise and offer input to the Fredericksburg City Council. Next slide, please. What is ALICE? ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employee. So these are working families, working individuals, sometimes a dual income family, sometimes an individual with multiple jobs. The ALICE report is a study of financial hardship commissioned by United Ways of Virginia and published in 2017. You can access this on the web. Go to United Way of Virginia and the ALICE report. I highly recommend to you the executive summary, which I believe is 18 pages, whereas the full report is, I believe, 230-some pages. But the executive summary works very well. The ALICE population in Virginia, reiterating what I touched previously, is comprised of those individuals and families who work hard and have an annual income more than the federal poverty level of $24,000, but less than that necessary, $61,000, to cover the basic cost of living in Virginia: housing, health care, child care, food, and transportation. Next slide, please. All right, let's take a snapshot of the city of Fredericksburg. At this pie chart, you'll see that 45% of the households within Fredericksburg are above the ALICE population. 16% of the households in this community are in poverty. 39% of the households comprise the Alice population. Again, that's households earning between $24,000 and $61,000 per year. With rents in the city of Fredericksburg running in excess of $1,000 for a one-bedroom apartment to approximately $1,500 for a two-bedroom apartment, you can see where someone within that population is spending a preponderance, not a preponderance, a large portion of their annual income just to get into a house, with very little discretionary income on discretionary funds on the other side of that. When you consider that's to get into an apartment or a house before they buy an ounce of food, they pay for insurance, a car payment, all the other things necessary to live. Okay, so let's just take a quick look. Total households 10,000. The median household income in Fredericksburg is $51,000. Percent Alice in poverty is 55%. The total households in Alice in poverty, and this number here, 4,500 strong, that was my calculation, it's actually 5,500 of the 10,000 households live in poverty or within the Alice population. The Alice population itself, at 39%, comprises 3,900 households out of 10,000 households in the city of Fredericksburg. Since we're talking about Planning District 16, let me give you some other information. And all of this is pulled from the Alice report. Caroline County, part of Planning District 16, 13% poverty, 26% Alice population, again between 24,000 and 61,000 per year. King George County, 6% poverty, 23% Alice. Spotsylvania County, 6% poverty, 41% Alice population. Stafford County, 5% poverty, and 30% Alice population. So within and across Planning District 16, there is a sizable Alice population. You put in poverty with that, you're talking about a considerable number of households within the district that are in dire need of affordable housing. Next slide, please. What are the factors for this? We'll go through them. The cost of land, zoning and building codes that increase per unit cost of development, density limitations, vertical height, building limitations, requirements for sidewalks, energy efficiency, etc. Lack of local government mandate authority to direct set-asides. The city and no one within the district has that authority. Gentrification. The preceding brief that you received, this dovetails nicely with that. Gentrification is wonderful. Who would not want to live in a $750,000 townhouse? I would. But that drives up adjacent property values, is going to drive up adjacent rent values, which has an increasing pressure on the scarcity of affordable housing within the city. NIMBY, not in my backyard, and to be honest, a lack of political will to address this issue. Next slide, please. Bottom line, this issue of affordable housing is likely to worsen due to population growth within the city and within the district. Rising mortgage interest rates, which will drive more people to rentals, which in turn will drive up rental cost. Stagnation or only nominal increases in wages and salaries. We have not heard anyone dispute the contention from either side of the political spectrum that over the past 40 years, wages in real dollars have been relatively stagnant. You couple stagnant wages with decreases in benefit packages, and this again puts more pressure on people financially, which increases the pressure on them to be able to afford a decent house to live in. From this, we will see increasing numbers of citizens at or below the Alice population. The fix will require innovative, out-of-the-box approaches. No one is suggesting that the government, Fredericksburg by itself, the local counties, or a regional plan, develop housing, low-income housing for the population. What we do need is to break the mold, out-of-the-box approaches. We need a government of political will to set the conditions for landowners, property owners and developers to set those conditions necessary that they might be able to provide more affordable housing and make a profit while they're doing that. No developer is going to develop anything and lose money in it. I failed to, I got ahead of myself. The recommended solutions: regulatory reform, tax incentives for developers, landowners, and landlords, government-owned land sales for affordable housing development. So that would require restrictions on the sale of land. There's also the possibility of government-owned land donation. We have spoken with developers. The single greatest factor, single greatest cost in their development of housing is the cost of land. Public-private developments and political will. The possible creation of a housing trust fund. Local governments, whether Fredericksburg or the surrounding counties, individually or collectively, setting the conditions necessary for development of affordable housing within Planning District 16. And the next slide, please. Which I got ahead of myself, my slides stuck together, and I jumped to my last slide before I hit the one on possible solutions. I thank you very much for your time. This, gentlemen, this is a problem today for many of our residents within the city, within the overall district, and this problem will likely grow worse before it ever even potentially gets better. Do you have any questions of me, please?
Mr. Straight, thank you. Boy, you picked a good question to answer, didn't you? I assume you're going to the outside counties also to have this conversation?
We spoke with Stafford County 2 weeks ago, and I addressed Spotsylvania County next Wednesday.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because from the numbers that you gave, it does sound like we have the largest density of the people at risk in the area, and I'm just it's going to be a challenge, and I'll personally do my best, and I know this commission will do their best to address it. But I'm curious how much success we'll have since we're already dealing with the problem, and the people are already here, I guess.
Yes, sir. I mean, as we go through, you drive through town, you see these beautiful houses for your infills. You see the development will be put in from the previous discussion. You see the developments on William Street they're in right now, all beautiful, all fantastic. But that in no way, shape, or form addresses what's required by approximately 5,000 households in the city of Fredericksburg. And we're not looking, we're not Pollyannish. We'll never fix affordable housing for everyone, but we believe that with the development of the political will, that affordable housing for a lot of people might be offered. And what might that comprise? And we'll throw out, modular home community development, trailer parks, high-rise apartments, smaller apartments, smaller houses, not tiny houses, smaller houses. You've all heard of Levittown, post-World War II, 1947, the first development out in New York that became the model for urban or suburban development throughout the United States for many years. Those all might be part of the solution. Incentivizing developers, again, landowners, maybe tax abatements for those who are willing to do something with their land that would allow developers to purchase land for a lower cost and perhaps bring in lower cost housing. So we don't know all the solutions. We offer things, but it will require collaborative effort on a lot of people. There'll be winners and there'll be losers. We like to focus on, by saying what can't be done, we like to think in terms of what can be done. Any law, any ordinance, any zoning, laws are written, laws are modified, and laws are discarded.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's late. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Next item is a general public comment period for anyone from the public would like to speak on any matter that is not listed on the agenda for public hearing. If anybody would like to speak, may come up at this time. Okay.
That's what they want.
All right. And we'll go on to Planning Commissioner comments. It's getting late. Do we have any comments from any of the members?
This is for Mike's and Chuck. We do traffic studies all the time, how many cars and all that stuff.
Mike.
My mic is on.
Green lights
on. I'll borrow his, but I mean, it's on.
His sounds better.
Anyway, we saw so much better times. But I was thinking about the issue up there, the Valvoline thing and all that. How often
Excuse
do
me.
we get an idea how many people and how many bicycles go on some of these paths? Because I go to Wegmans regularly. I hardly ever see anybody get up on the trail there. Of course, you know, the Heritage Trail and all that, yeah, gazillion peoples. I just wonder, do we ever do any kind of head count on that kind of?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, that's why I looked at Chuck. But we'll see what we can find out between now and July 11th.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was just, because I was thinking, I hardly see anybody that far up on that trail, but, you know, down below, you see.
Hill, you know.
Yeah, because you got to go along, you have to go
You mean up on Fall
uphill.
Hill? Are you saying up on Fall Hill?
Yeah, once you get up above, by Wegmans, you don't see too many people walking up about there. At least I don't.
Okay.
Now, down below, yeah. a
You
whole
can come
lot.
and join me sometime. I come on.
Yeah, well, sure,
come on
I'll take my bicycle. You got to walk, right?
I would agree with Mr. Solly who spoke. If you start breaking up the paths and having crosses where pedestrians and vehicles are going, they won't use them. I think that might be some of the potential problem as we go that. And then also it kind of, right now it kind of dead ends. I know there's a proposal to kind of cross over to Cowan, and I think once you do that, then you'll start seeing more traffic up that way.
There's a considerable amount of foot traffic from the folks living immediately on the east side of 95, already on top of the hill. I personally have seen that going across there too, so.
There is foot traffic up there.
I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying I don't see a whole lot of it. I'm just trying to figure out, you know.
It is a good question to sort of figure out not traffic counts, bike counts, walking counts. It's a good point.
I wonder how you would do that, unlike, you know, automobiles where you put that, you know, the ticker in the street and you can.
Well, Eric Nelson and others used to go down to the train station once or twice a year and click everybody that was getting on the train. So maybe we can have Eric go up there and click everybody who's coming up the trail.
I'm sure it's been done somehow.
Okay, all right. Any other comments?
I have one question. Isn't the city doing a study on affordable housing that the council requested?
I was going to get that under planning director comments.
Thank you.
All right.
Maybe Mr. Gant, you ought to just stay there for a second.
Okay.
There's a bottom line budget to talk about. Yes, actually yesterday, there was over an hour-long discussion at the city council regarding the affordable housing issue. Mike and Susanna have put together a presentation that began to document and talk about it and then plot some steps forward. Part of that was noting that notices were given to the occupants of the Fredericksburg Emory Mobile Home Park at the end of May, that they had 6 months to move out, which was the legal requirement. So that notice has gone out, and the plan is to move forward with removing those, the property owner's plan is to go forward to remove those units. I believe that their proposal for comp plan amendment and rezoning are somewhat in limbo. They're working on that at this point. They may come back before the 6 months is up. They may not, but it's not slated to be on your July agenda. So it would be August or September or sometime later, I would expect. So the affordable housing issue was discussed. As part of the Area 6 plan, we are going to be suggesting to the council and to you, Planning Commission, that there are ways to sort of encourage affordable housing State code doesn't allow us to mandate it, but we can create incentives for it. And I think the Maker District provides a unique opportunity to kind of test those ideas in the city to see if we can make those things work. There are other options that we're going to be presenting for consideration. We're looking at perhaps getting some folks that are expert, certainly more expert than we are in terms of housing issues and the process of developing housing programs, to give the council and planning commission options to consider. So we do intend to get back to the planning commission in September with some ideas, and we will certainly keep you all appraised as we move forward.
Mr. Bates?
Mr. Gant, the presentation that was made to council the other night, could we get that same presentation?
Sure.
Maybe at our next meeting?
Sure.
That'd be
Sure.
good. I thought Mr. Straight made an interesting presentation, but there's no question that it's an issue in the city, but it's a very complex problem, and people oftentimes, I think, just feel that, oh, we just want to let people build low income or lower priced apartments and residential property. I'm not at all sure that that's the right approach, or certainly the only approach. You don't think of it a lot of times, but one of the things that leads to very unaffordable housing are high taxes. Taxes definitely have an impact, and landlords have to recoup their investment. And with the cost of so much dealing with in real estate these days, that rental real estate generally is not a good investment anymore, particularly for single-family homes. Almost everyone I know has gotten out of that business because your overhead and expenses are just so great. I was shocked the other day when I read that story in the paper about the number of evictions in the city of Fredericksburg. That's absolutely shocking. I remember when I was city attorney that there might be maybe three or four a month, if that. And they're saying they're now doing 40 to 60 every single month in little old Fredericksburg. That's truly shocking. And I mean, I certainly don't know what the answer is to it, but I think that there are probably a lot of things that can be done by the government to alleviate the situation. Number one is to bring better paying jobs to Fredericksburg. That's certainly one. But anyway, I think it would be nice to have that presentation and for the Planning Commission to spend some time thinking about this subject.
Okay.
Please, Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm sorry. Well, I had like two questions and then I guess a comment. Does the city own any developable large-scale pieces of property currently? I know we've talked about some of their other smaller ones.
Virginia Organizing came to our office with a list of all the city-owned properties, and it's a substantial amount of acreage that the city owns. And we went through that list piece by piece. We own wetlands and river adjacent areas and stream corridors,
Right.
and then like this building. So there really wasn't, we went through the entire list, and there was maybe one small property that maybe if it didn't turn out to have the Revolutionary War gunnery on it, would be available for the city to kind of do something like that with. So we aren't in the business of being a landlord. No, sir.
Okay. All right. Maybe the property on Kenmore Avenue, if that ever comes up for sale, maybe.
Which one?
You were talking about rezoning where the
Oh, you're talking
caretakers.
about the Mary Washington House?
Yeah.
Or the
We could build
caretaker's
some nice
house?
little places there.
Well, and again, what we do own, there was a drive to kind of, to sell,
Sure.
excess property that we owned. So that's part of that project.
All right. And then, talking about rentals and the cost of that. I was told recently that there used to be a program that the city had where they would inspect all of the rental properties every 2 years to make sure that they were up to code and what people were charging for rooms or apartments or whatever were actually legitimate. I can't imagine that with such a crisis of people finding affordable housing that there aren't maybe some substandard units in the city. Is that program still alive, or?
It's no longer live. It was a rental inspection program that has been discontinued.
We do have a full-time property maintenance person that does respond to folks that have complaints about issues. So we do, it's not as aggressive as you will, as you might think, or as you might wish in terms of that former program, but we do have a full-time person that responds to folks that do have issues.
So it's more of a pull than a push.
Yes.
Okay.
And just my overall comment, I went to the ARB and planning staff and everybody else except for the planning commission meeting that they're looking at all the historic guidebook and stuff like that. And this topic came up specifically about it. And they were talking a lot about areas that would cross over into what we're doing and what we are charged with as a planning commission. And so I'm just wondering for us, would it be feasible for us to maybe look at actually having like a working group meeting to actually tackle this topic? And as we look at the next small area plan, you know, we should be armed with that information and looking at what possible things that we could do to incorporate that. And I know that we've got what we're going to be looking at here shortly. There's some areas that maybe those landowners have some parcels that might be willing to do something if we were able to have that power, you know, to negotiate and provide incentives, I should say. So I just would proffer that up because I do think it's something that we need to look at. If there are 5,000 homes that are, you know, struggling with that, and you can say, well, bring more higher paying jobs, but if the guy's skill set is working a cash register, that high paid job is not going to change his situation. You may bring another 10,000 people, so yeah, we lower the percentage, we move it from, you know, whatever it is by a half a point, but we're not actually affecting real change. So there's another component to that we have to look at, but you know, so I just think it's something that the Planning Commission, I think it's well within our bounds and that we should try to tackle.
You're reinforcing what Mr. Pate said. It is a complex issue.
Right.
And I just want to ask a question. So the affordable housing study, will it also address what we already have that's affordable housing? Like, for instance, I can say in my neighborhood, I can point out at least a dozen homes that are, they don't call it Section 8 anymore, you know, affordable housing or, you know, but those are owners who have done something there to rent their homes out at a subsidized, you know, price.
We will, yes, the short answer is yes. We're going to try to document as much as we can and conduct some survey work outside of, to get beyond the basic census data to get a better sense of the breadth of the issue. It is my sense that this is a priority for council. Council's taking the lead on this. I would urge you either collectively or individually to talk to council members to determine what is the appropriate role that they feel that the Planning Commission should play on it. It's definitely a land use issue. I definitely understand Planning Commission's involvement, but it's a little bit of a dance here how we're going to all kind of get together on this thing. I believe that there is going to be a committee that council is setting up. Membership from the Planning Commission is certainly an option. I don't have a problem with it, but you all got to talk with your favorite council members to determine how to best coordinate that.
Well, I mean, but you do bring it back around to the small area plans, though,
Right.
when you start thinking about that, because now we're getting into another facet as we talk about planning those small areas. So what does that really look like as we see these evolving or emerging type issues that we need to, you know, look into?
That was the next item I was going to go to, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hornung could probably rejoin the dais. I'm not going to talk specifically about.
It's always my pleasure to sit down here.
Related to. Just to give you an update of where we are in the area planning process, Mike is working assiduously on the ordinances associated with Area 3, creating the form-based code and other elements, the change of that, working with the city attorney. We hope to get that initiated by council this summer. He and Susanna were working very hard on the policy elements of Area 6. That's scheduled for a work session at council on July 10th. A little bit more specifics there. It probably won't be initiated until August. So we're working through on that. We have a signed contract from Street Sense to start work on the next round of area plans. I anticipate the city manager will be signing that contract in the next few days. So we'll be starting in July on our next area plan, which is pointed out is downtown, the 100-acre core, and then the 5 neighborhoods immediately adjacent to that. And certainly affordable housing is one of the many issues that need to be addressed. One of the initial projects of that is a citywide market analysis, market assessment of all variety of economic uses, including housing, and affordable housing is an issue that we had called out for them to focus on.
Excuse me, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, on the new project, new efforts by Street Sense, how is this contract differ from the one they had before?
Well, I would say in some ways it's similar. It's probably a little bit more fleshed out in terms of the public involvement process. We felt that needed to be enhanced, particularly for downtown, Area 7 and then Area 1, the Central Park Celebrate area. That those are areas that are obviously of citywide, region-wide interests and concerns. So we're looking at a more aggressive public involvement process in both those elements. One element, just as an example, is to do a sort of have a storefront presence for a period of time in downtown for people to just go and drop in and talk to the Street Sense folks, and an extensive and multi-layered method of involving all variety of folks, obviously including the Planning Commission.
Well, they didn't last time include us very much, and it would be nice if they could have a requirement that they would meet with us periodically, a set number of times at least, so that we're more involved directly with them, not as part of some neighborhood meeting or something, but to actually have a real discussion with them about, you know, what we have an interest in, and providing guidance to them, because I thought that was frustrating last time, that we had to go to these neighborhood meetings to talk to them.
Sure, I understand.
Good.
So that's moving forward. I would also let everyone know that we have been working with the neighborhoods in Area 6. We've attended a couple of the meetings of the Fall Hill Neighborhood Association to keep them apprised of what's going on. And then we had a meeting last Thursday with more business property owners in the Creator Maker District corridor, and looking at creating a sort of the private end of that process to go forward. This can't be just a top-down governmental activity. If we're to have that Creator Maker District work, it has to sort of be a sort of a quasi-Main Street program coming up from the property owners as well. And we had over 30 people there, and they all seemed to be very enthused. Our next step is set up an organizing meeting for them as an entity to pull themselves together.
So I'm just going to help Mr. Rodriguez out a little bit. So we can continue to use the term the Maker District. So has City Council said definitely
No.
we're going to create these, or are we just still drafting something?
That's what we're going to go to council on July 10th with the specific proposal. There's been a lot of questions that council quite legitimately has had. Well, just, you know, how big are these developments going to be, and how many units per acres are going to be, and how does that TDR program work exactly, and where does affordable housing fit in all this? So we're going to try to flesh out those ideas as a starting point to put something on the table to initiate the public hearing process. I don't think it's anything different than what we've talked to you all about. It's just the fleshing out the details.
But that whole Maker District concept is actually it's not an evolution. It really is something new, emerging. I mean, you know, the question will be, you got to get the first one in,
Right.
to determine what you want to do with anything else.
Right.
So.
Right. So I think, and we've not had any significant, and no one has said, hey, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of, let's not even do it. So I think it's just a matter of gradation and degree. So I think we'll move forward with something.
Were there minutes from that meeting? I wasn't able to make it. I wanted to, but.
The neighborhood meeting?
Mm-hmm.
There were some notes, but no, not minutes. We're working with the Ann Glave and her folks on some notes. We're pulling that together.
Okay, great, thank you.
And then lastly, just two items of administrative. One of the reasons that we have not been able to move forward as quickly on area planning activities, finishing up 3 and 6, is that Mike's been doing 2 jobs. He's been zoning administrator most of the time for the past 6 months with a brief exemption, and doing his senior planning work. But we have offered, and someone has accepted for the position of zoning administrator, so hopefully we will have a zoning administrator that will be able to stick around with us, a guy named James Newman. He's currently working in Fluvanna County. He starts on July 16th. Mike is counting down the days to July 16th. And then one last piece of business. It occasionally occurs that you, the commission, don't have an August meeting. Your meeting in August is on the 14th. You all have plans to be around. Would we have a quorum if we had a meeting on August 14th? We don't have anything specifically scheduled, slated to come forward on that day that I don't think. I can't think of anything. Right. But I don't know that we have necessarily something. But you know, we will go ahead and schedule unless you all tell me now that many of you are traipsing off elsewhere on the 14th. Okay, so 1 absent.
I'll see you there.
All right, 2 out.
So you don't know if you have anything on to talk about, but you're still going to schedule it?
Well, no, if we have nothing to talk about, we're not going to have a meeting, just have a meeting.
Okay.
Our deadlines for applications that will come before you in August is July 1.
Okay.
So
We've heard a rumor of something, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that project.
We'll have a TRC meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
About a potential special use.
Yeah.
You're not anticipating that the things up here tonight, Silver Project will be back? You know,
But that's at your July meeting.
Oh, I see, you're talking about August.
I'm talking about August.
Gotcha.
So we have 2 absent for August. Anyone else we know for certain is absent in August? All right, so it looks like we may have a quorum if we do need to have a meeting. Okay, that's all. I just
Not
wanted to-
certain, but
Possible.
my wife sets my
I understand.
summer schedule.
I
So,
understand. Well, if you all could look at your schedules and consult your significant others so that we know whether you'll be around on the 14th, I appreciate that. August 15th, you're right. I was looking at the council date. Sorry.
Are you going to be back by then?
No, I will not.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry.
So that means we have to celebrate my birthday at the next
No,
meeting.
wait a minute. It's August
if you'll bring the
8th, isn't it?
cupcakes, Renee, that would be great.
August 8th.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's August 8th, the second Wednesday. August 8th.
Ah, I got you now.
August 8th. August 8th. I'm sorry. I was.
Okay. Is that the end of the planning director comment?
Yes, that's all.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
With that,
Everybody know.
I'm going to call this meeting adjourned for tonight. Thank you all very much for your time.